This conference will now be recorded.
Okay. And thank you to Christina from Department of Forestry. Where are you, Christina? I think I saw you. There you are. She is helping us take some notes of the meeting. So thank you for that. We are going to try to take a break, little over halfway through this, and then any others as we needed. So we'll kind of play it by ear with the group's desire here. And getting some phone noise from one of our callers. So if we could just have everybody make sure you are muted, that'd be great, especially the phone callers if you could get on your end, because if I mute, then it's a little harder for you to come off of mute. Okay, thank you. Let's go ahead and hopefully everybody got the agenda through email. If you did not, you can shoot me an email. I'll put my email in the chat right now, so you can have that. And if you didn't get the agenda, let me know and I will shoot it over to you right now. We're going to try to have folks, while we're going through the agenda, you use the raise hand function or the chat function to indicate you'd like to say something, and then we can take you off mute. For introductions, though, I'll just go ahead and kind of call folks by agency or organization, and whoever is representing that agency, whoever's in charge, I guess, can introduce themselves and the rest of their team. So we'd like to know who you are, what organization you're with, what your tie to the EAB issue is or interest, and if we're missing anybody or if somebody wasn't listed on the agenda, you can feel free to introduce them at that time. So I will start with myself. My name is Patrick Singh. I'm with a firm called Public Affairs Council. We manage the Invasive Species Council. We just started that work in February, so I will have to say that I'm quickly getting up to speed on all things EAB. So I apologize I don't have the technical knowledge that many of you have. I think that's what you all are here for. But I will do my best to try to just make sure we're on track and on time today for our agenda. We have a couple other representatives here from the Invasive Species Council. I'm going to start with Dr. Moffitt, who is our vice chair.
Yeah, thank you, Patrick, for pulling this together quickly. And I think Rick Boatner was going to try to come on. I'm going to stay here for part of the meeting today. And thank you, everyone, for your rapid and informed responses. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. And I do see Rick, who is our newly appointed chair as of Friday and past chair. Rick, can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Rick Boatner. I'm the Invasive Species Wildlife Integrity Supervisor for Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife, and also the current chair of the Oregon Invasive Species Council. And again, thank you, Patrick and Karen, for putting this together.
I'm going to go to Department of Ag. Chris, can you introduce yourself and your team?
Sure. Thank you, Patrick. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Chris Beneman. I'm the interim director of our Plant Protection and Conservation Program area. And on today's call, we also have 3 other members of the ODA who I'd like for them to introduce themselves. So start with you, Tom.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Tom Valenti. I'm an entomologist with ODA.
I'll go to you next, Max.
I'm Max Ragazzino. I'm a biocontrol entomologist, and Emerald Ash Borer was my dissertation. So unfortunately very familiar with this insect.
Bad for you, good for us. Thank you, Max. Carrie.
Hi, I'm Carrie Schwartz. I'm an entomologist with ODA, and I oversee the field offices, and they are, doing the trapping for our state. I also do a lot of GIS work too for our program.
Okay, thank you, ODA team. Our other kind of organizer for today is Karen Ripley from the Forest Service. Karen, can you say hello?
Sure. Karen Ripley, I'm a forest entomologist and coordinate forest health monitoring with the U.S. Forest Service, and I'm a member of the Invasive Species Council.
Let's go to the Department of Forestry. Dr. Williams, I see you on. Can you introduce you and your folks there at ODF?
Hi, Patrick. Yeah, this is Wyatt Williams, Invasive Species Specialist in the Forest Health Unit at Oregon Department of Forestry, and I'm our agency's rep on the Oregon Invasive Species Council. And today on the call from ODF are Adam, Scott, Christine, and Christina. And I'd like for the four of them to introduce themselves as well. Adam.
Hi, everyone. Adam Coble, Forest Health and Monitoring Manager at ODF.
And Scott.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am about a month into my new position as the Urban and Community Forestry Assistance Program Manager. So I've known EAB was coming. It was just a matter of when and how. So delighted and honored to work with a team like this and to add value where I can.
Thank you. And Christine.
I'm Christine Buell, an entomologist in the Forest Health Unit at ODF, supporting Wyatt in EAB, and we also have Jim Gersbach, our Public Affairs, so I'll hand it off to you, Jim.
Oh, thank you. Excuse me, Jim. Sorry about that. Jim, are you there?
Jim Gersbach, Oregon Department of Forestry. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Public Affairs supporting the Forest Health team on communications and working with ODA's communications team.
I apologize there, Jim. I did not see you on my screen. And Christina, who has a very important job today.
I'm Christina. I'm supporting Adam here in the Forest Health Unit. I've been here about a month, and prior to this, I was actually with Department of Agriculture for over 6 years.
Christina, thank you for taking notes today for the meeting. And I think that concludes ODF. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Williams. I'm just going to go down the list that I have based on the agenda. So OSU Forestry Extension. Do we have Dave Shaw here?
Yeah, hello, I'm Dave Shaw. I'm the Forest Health Specialist for Forestry and Natural Resources Extension. I'm also joined by two others from Extension that I see on the list, Jennifer Alexander. Jennifer, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Jennifer Alexander. I direct our Extension Communications team. We've been working closely with Dave and other faculty as we have convened our internal OSU Extension EAB team focused on the part of our role and response related to public outreach and education.
Thanks, Jennifer. We also have Alex Gorman. Alex, would you introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, thanks, Dave. Alex Gorman. I'm the forestry faculty member for Washington and Columbia and Yamhill counties, and I have a background. I did my graduate work in forest management with in the face of invasive species. So this is my realm.
Great. Well, thank you all. Yeah, OSU Extension is keen to stay involved with everybody and link and make sure our messages, reflect what the community really wants to get the public to hear. So, thank you.
Hey, this is Tom Martin, the City of Forest Grove. I just joined the call.
Thank you, Tom. I will change your name on here from caller to. Okay, we've heard from Rick already from ODFW. Is there anybody else from ODFW that is here? Okay. Rick, is there anybody else from your team?
No.
Okay. USDA, let's start with APHIS. Jake?
Hi, everybody. Hopefully you don't hear the airplane going over. My name is Jake Bodart. I'm the State Plant Health Director and Entomologist for USDA Animal Plant Health Inspection Services. We also have Anna and Mariah on the call today. Mariah may be a little late, but if she's here, go ahead and introduce yourselves.
I'm not sure if Mariah is here, but this is Anna. Hello, everyone. I'm a plant health safeguarding specialist here with the USDA in Portland, APHIS BPQ. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. So that's everybody from APHIS, and I see that Cody hopped on from ODA if he wants to introduce himself.
Yeah, certainly. Thanks, Jake. Sorry for my late arrival here. But yeah, my name is Cody Holthouse, sometimes known as Mark as well. And I am the Portland survey coordinator for a lot of different invasive insects, mostly working with Japanese beetle and spongy moth. But now we'll probably be working more on emerald ash borer. And I'm going to be making the transition to manager of the ODA IPPM program. So this is perfect timing for me to join this meeting. Excited to be here.
Thank you. Karen, we've had you say hi, but can you introduce anybody else from your team from Forest Service?
I believe I saw Sarah Navarro and was expecting Stephen Baker. Yes. So Sarah, then Stephen, please. Sarah, your audio is garbled. Still garbled. Let's go to Stephen and then
hey,
back
everyone.
to Sarah.
Hope my audio is okay. Stephen Baker, Forest Service Pacific Northwest Region, Urban and Community Forestry Program Manager. Thank you.
It looks like Sarah's not tuned back in yet. Sarah Navarro's a plant pathologist with the Forest Service, and she coordinates the sudden oak death work, and that's another interagency group in response to an invasive pest. So she has great experience to lend to us. There she's commenting in the chat. That's it for the Forest Service, I believe.
Great. Thank you, Karen. And Sarah, if you need to call in by phone, in addition to your video, you can do that as well. NRCS, is Jessica here? Jessica, I see you on the list.
Hi, Jessica Wells. I'm the district conservationist here in Washington County. And I believe that I've got a couple of other folks on. Kathy, I saw her name, and then Andrew, so I'll let them introduce themselves, although Andrew may not be on yet.
Hi, can you hear me? Looks like my camera's not coming on. I'm Kathy Pendergrass. It's so exciting to see all these people. I didn't even know you were out there. It's great. We're going to need all your expertise. I am a plant materials specialist. I work for NRCS out of our state office. So I work across the state of Oregon, do a lot of wetland restoration work. We've got a lot of ash out on our wetland restoration sites. So we'll be on the lookout for this, as well as we try to bring funds for private land owners to try and assist with various resource concerns. So that's a big part of why we're going to be here. And our forester, Andrew, are you on yet? He thought he was going to be a little bit late, but his intent was to be here. So, hi.
Thank you, Kathy. Parks and Rec.
That's me, Tom Martin. I'm the park supervisor for the city of Forest Grove, and my arborist Geert should be on as well.
Okay, thank you, Tom. Noel Bachelor. I'm not seeing Noel on yet. Or Craig Leach. How about Portland Parks and Rec? Angie or Kendra?
Hey there, my name is Nick Basai. I represent Portland Parks and Recreation Urban Forestry. Angie DeSalvo is my manager. She couldn't be, I don't think she's on the call today, but I'm coordinating our EAB efforts on urban forestry for the interim. And I was part of the Oregon Response and Readiness and Response Planning Committee back in 2018 when we contributed to drafting the state EAB plan. And I will pass it on to Maha, who's representing the other division within our bureau.
Thanks, Nick. Hey, everybody. I am here representing Portland Parks and also in lieu of my supervisor who couldn't make it. So I'm an ecologist with the natural resource section, and we manage the natural areas west of the Willamette. So areas like Forest Park and Markham Park. Thanks.
Thank you to the both of you. How about Rob from Metro?
Yeah, hi, this is Rob Hamrick. I'm the Integrated Pest Management Program Manager for Metro. We're the regional government here, 3 counties, 22 cities. And yeah, I also help on the Japanese Beetle Project in Washington County, managing the yard debris for our solid waste and our WPES programs. I'm here to learn and help.
Thank you, Rob. Welcome. Tualatin Soil Water Conservation District.
Hi, I'm Brandy Safal. I'm the Forest Conservation Specialist for Tualatin SWCD, and I'm joined with Tyler. Tyler, are you here?
Yep, I'm here. My name is Tyler Pedersen. I'm the Invasive Species Program Coordinator at the Tualatin SWCD.
Thank you. Clean Water Services, Rob or Randy?
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. This is Robert Emanuel. I'm the Integrated Pest Management Coordinator for Clean Water Services, and I work on a lot of ash-dominated systems for restoration as well. I have 2 colleagues who are also involved. Neither of them could be there. That's Randy Lawrence and Jill Erickson. So I'll represent today, and happy to be here. I was involved in commenting on the Response and Readiness Plan back in the day with Dominic Mays, also known as Oregon Dad, and looking forward to working with a lot of familiar faces and some new folks as well under sad conditions.
Thank you, Rob. Tualatin Watershed Council, Sam Sharka. How about Tualatin River NWRC, Kurt?
Kurt, this is Karen. He RSVP'd, was unable to attend.
Oh, great, thank you. Center for Lakes and Reservoirs, Kat De Rivera here. I'm not seeing her on the list. Okay, Tom, we heard from you from City of Forest Grove. And who are the others from City of Forest Grove? You can introduce yourselves.
Yes, hi, I'm Dan Reardon, Senior Planner with the city and also the staff liaison to the city's Community Forestry Commission. And I don't think we have Jesse Vanderzanden's not on the call. Maybe I haven't seen him. If he is, he could probably introduce himself. And Tom, I don't know if Gert is on the call yet.
I texted him, he didn't respond to me, so I'm not sure. He may be having trouble getting on the call.
Okay, so I think that's it from Forest Grove.
Okay, thank you. Anybody from any other cities that we haven't mentioned? Banks, Cornelius, North Plains, Hillsborough, or Gaston?
Let's see.
Jolynn?
Yes, this is Jolynn Becker with the City of Banks. I'm the city manager. So I'm just kind of listening to see how this could affect the city.
Great. Okay, any other city representatives?
Yeah, my name is Laura Trunk. I work for the city of Hillsborough and I'm the restoration specialist here, and I work a lot in wetlands and repairing corridors. So I will be representing the city of Hillsborough.
Great, thank you, Laura. Final call, anybody else from a city? How about ODOT? Will, Andrew, or Daniel?
I see Daniel's phone. Maybe he's having problems becoming alive, active.
Okay, Dan, if you're having some audio issues, you can put in your info in the chat there or switch to your phone and we'll have you introduce yourself. In the meantime, how about DEQ? Is Bob Barros or anybody else from DEQ on? Washington County, Stephen Shane. And we've got a few folks who have called in, and I don't know if you've spoken up yet, but I'm going to try to, if you have called in by phone, we have you listed as just caller. If you wouldn't mind unmuting yourself and saying who you are, so we can change your name on here. And it's possible you may need to hit *6 to unmute if I've muted you on my end.
Hi, this is Marshall Johnson with Portland Parks and Rec. Can you hear me?
Yes, Marshall, thank you.
Okay, thanks for that tip. I was trying to unmute, but it wasn't working earlier.
Awesome.
And I work with Maha and Kendra Peterson Morgan, and I'm specifically working in Forest Park and Riverview Natural Area in the city.
Thanks, Marshall. We've got 2 more phone callers. We're hoping to identify you. If you could unmute or hit *6 to unmute. Okay, how about anybody else from an agency or organization we have not called on?
This is Karen. I'd call out, there are a couple people here from the Washington Department of Natural Resources and from Washington State University.
And Dan Lepschat was in the chat from ODOT.
Yeah. Well, the folks from Washington DNR with the Urban and Community Forestry Program, Ben Thompson and Daria Gustalis, and then another person was Todd Murray from Washington State University. They're members. The Washington Invasive Species Council had an interest in what's going on in Oregon, but their director was not able to attend. So I think he tapped them to listen. But I told them they had to be very quiet.
Excellent, thank you. Anybody else that we've missed or would like to introduce themselves?
Hi. Oh, sorry. You first.
Okay. Sorry, I jumped on a little bit late. My name is Mariah Davis. I'm the pest survey specialist with APHIS in Portland.
Thanks, Mariah. Thomas?
Hi, everyone. I'm Tom Brumbelow. I'm a biologist with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service in Portland.
You. Okay, anybody else that we have not called on?
Patrick, I'll just mention that Dan Lepschat identified himself using the chat. He's not able to use his audio right now, but he just wanted to say hello and that he's a forester certified arborist, urban forester representing ODOT.
Perfect. Thank you. Welcome, Dan. Thank you, Chris. Okay, I think we have everybody. That was an exercise. Thank you all for your patience in getting through it, and thank you all for being here. Got a good group of folks and all the hopefully necessary technical folks to kind of help us get through today's agenda. We are going to start kind of with a situation report, and I'm going to turn it over to Chris Beneman.
Great, thank you, Patrick. I'm not as well versed with Teams, so I'm gonna apologize. We switched over, the GoToMeeting. The estate switched over to Teams, so I'm a little rusty on how to use GoTo, and I believe I'm gonna need permission access in order to share my screen, Patrick.
Let me turn that on here.
So I apologize if this transition's a little clunky, everyone. But again, just in the meantime, I'll say thank you, everybody, for being here. And just a kind of a reminder of why we're all gathering here. So we've identified everyone on this list, hopefully trying to be as comprehensive as possible to identify any and all folks who are going to be affected by EAB. This is going to be a marathon. It's not a race. And it reaches out to a wide range of audience. So hence why we're calling this kind of a task force. And really the goal of this meeting, again, is to just sort of get everyone on the same page, update you with maybe some behind the scenes activities that you might not be aware of, as well as, re-identifying the more forefront activities that have been having that hopefully you are aware of. And then just try to identify how we can move forward and see how we can all help and chip in and participate on this, because I do want, although ODA is the lead, I do want to iterate that this is a collective effort, that we all need to band together and try to tackle this as best as we can. So saying with that, I think in theory I can share my screen. Opened. Sorry, it's asking me to open into system preferences. And if anyone has any tips they want to shout out at me right now, I'm more than happy to take those. Because it's asking me for permissions right now, so I might not be able to do this easily.
Let me see if I can, I made you a presenter, but let me see if making you a host might, or organize. I'm not great on GoToMeeting either, but let's see here. Organizer.
Chris, is it asking you for permissions on from GoToMeeting or from your Mac?
As it's from GoToMeeting.
Okay.
And then now it's getting security preferences, and I know I don't have that because I'm not an administrator for our system.
Yeah, because GoTo was removed off the computers at ODA, so you might have lost all permissions to share screen.
Okay.
Chris, do you want to email me whatever you have? Pull it up on my computer if that works.
All right. I apologize, everyone, for this technical issue. We didn't think about this ahead of time. Everyone's using different platforms these days. So we're going to test to see how fast my network is.
Chris, would it make sense for us to do the 10-minute break now?
Why not?
We'll get that.
All right. Okay. I'm sorry. Thank you, Jake.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Let's take a few minute break, 10-minute break here, and we'll work out our tech issues. If anybody else needs to, that's slated to speak on an issue today that needs to share your screen, maybe shoot me an email with what you need to have shared, and we'll make, if you're not able to share on your end. But let's take a little break and then come back, and we'll get rolling again. Thank you, everybody.
So I just sent you that email, Patrick.
Okay, thanks, Chris.
I'm going to send you a one-pager as well, Chris. Patrick.
Okay, thanks.
Send it to you, right, Patrick?
Yes.
I've gotten spoiled with Teams, I have to admit, because with Teams it's so easy, you don't need to grant permissions or anything. Anybody can share and you can just upload things really easily.
Yeah, might be something for the council to look at, switching either to Teams or to Zoom or something a little bit more widely used. Okay.
This is Tom from Geert Jorgensen is on the call. He just hadn't figured out how to unmute himself yet. So that's City of Forest Grove. He's our arborist.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Thank you, Tom. Okay, well, Chris, I've got your presentation. Let's give it till, let's say 1:40, and let everybody settle back in, and then we'll get rolling again.
All right, if folks are on the line and you can still hear, I think looks like we've got that up and running. So I appreciate everyone's patience as we sorted that out. Again, apologies for that. That was not on the agenda if you had a minute to look at that. All right. All right, so we got our slides up, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. So Patrick is navigating the slides for me since I don't have ownership. So Patrick will just kind of let you know if I need you to switch. So just again, we're gathered here today acting as a task force, and just a, one definition, I'm sure there's many out there of what a task force is. And so the idea is that we're a group of people with a common goal. We're coming from diverse perspectives, backgrounds, positions, and our goal is to kind of help facilitate development of ideas, create opportunities, answer questions, and help solve a unified problem. All right, so next slide, please. So I wanted to start just with an overview timeline of kind of how we got here. So many of you, if you've been keeping up with the media, are probably familiar with this, but just again, just a recap, so we're starting on the same page. So June 30th, ODF was first notified about the suspect EAB infested trees in Forest Grove, and ODF responded immediately by visiting the site that same day. That was done by Christine Buell, who's also on today's call. And she was able to key that specimen out and confirmed in her professional opinion that it was indeed EAB. The next day, which was a Friday, right before the 4th of July weekend, ODF reported that detection to ODA. We also were able to coordinate and again with assistance from our partners at ODF to contact the school in Forest Grove where these trees were found. And the school was more than agreeable to responding quickly by cutting down those trees. So they were cut, chipped, and have been covered and remain on site right now until we can find another location for those trips or another way to dispose of them. And then the holiday weekend passed. First thing Monday morning, ODF, ODA, USDA met first thing in the morning, held our initial response meeting to kind of come up with an immediate game plan, and then also continued to have a site visit at the school location, Forest Grove, assess the trees and some of the surrounding areas, and then really spent that next couple of days. We did have a lag time there, but that was really to focus on our public announcement, as we wanted to make sure that we were reporting what we knew at the time, because we knew that this was going to immediately raise a lot of questions, make sure that our messages were in line. So that took some time to put together, again, coordinating between ODF and the ODA communications team. And then that was released publicly and widely on July 11th. And then on that same day, Oregon received USDA confirmation for the identification of the singular sample that was submitted for confirmation that it was indeed Agrillus planopelis, or the EAB, that we are here today to discuss. And then I took extra step by kind of touching base with our nursery industry, because ash is sold within the nursery industry, as well as olive and white fringe tree. So I needed to get them briefed on the situation and what they might expect to in the upcoming months. Next slide, please. So again, an overview of kind of what I'm calling the ground zero was the Joseph Gale Elementary School. There were 12 individual trees that were identified at this site, and to reiterate, they are no longer there. They were cut down. By contacting the school, luckily I was surprised that they actually had records, that they knew that these trees were planted in 2012, and they were procured from a local landscaper / nursery that was located in Aloha. We don't know, they didn't have any records at this point as what that was a number of years ago about where those trees were originally purchased from. So we don't know if they were sourced locally, if they were imported at one point. Oregon does not have any requirements for nurseries to keep records really for that extended period of time. Most don't, so that really wasn't a surprise. It was just an avenue to explore. Based on the level of infestation and the signs and symptoms we saw on these trees, specialists kind of estimate that these trees have probably been infested for 3 to 5 years as a conservative estimate. I do want to stress that although we know that when these trees were planted, we know where they came from, we don't have any direct line of evidence to suggest that, yes, this is where the EAB came from, that this was the source of introduction. It still could have come from another tree in the area. It could have come on firewood. That was always a long time way that I think folks thought that that was how EAB was going to get into Oregon, was through infested firewood. So I only point this out to just say that is what we know about these initial trees where this was found. I'm not trying to make any direct line of connection there. Next slide, please. So I just want to step and just kind of recap again quickly, what have we been doing to prepare? Because again, I think we all know this wasn't a matter of if, it was a matter of when. So ODF has been having ongoing monitoring for EAB for the past several years with no positive detections. We, as an ODA, had secured federal funds through the formerly known as Farm Bill, or the PPA 7721 grant system to obtain funding for biocontrol work, because since this has been deregulated on the federal levels in early 2021, that is where USDA has kind of been putting a lot of their efforts into the focus on biocontrol work. So we kind of took initial steps to secure that funding, and already we've submitted proposal for continued funding for the next year. And this is now going to be a tool in our greater toolbox and how Oregon is going to respond to EAB. And just as an aside, not because we knew this was coming, but just because we tend to incorporate multiple insect pests when we're doing statewide surveys. We had performed 2 years of surveys focusing on nurseries, in particular nurseries that tend to import high volumes of plant material coming from out of state. So I was kind of focusing on wood-boring insects at large, but that also included EAB, and we were also landscaping for nearby ash trees around those properties. And then ODF, that's been publicized. Maybe you've seen it in OPB media announcements that ODF has had and still does have an ongoing seed collection project on ash trees in hopes to be able to have a seed source to save the species in the event of emergency. Next slide. So you're probably all well familiar with the Emerald Ash Borer Readiness and Response Plan. So again, that was spearheaded by ODF in collaboration with ODA and USDA and some others who were asked to consult on this and to put together just that. It's a response plan in the event of when Emerald Ash Borer arrived. That was first published in 2018, slightly updated in 2021. And again, that was just to create an outline of which we are relying on right now to provide guidance on how we're acting in response to this infestation. Next, please. So that's just a quick overview of what has been done in the past. So what are we doing now that EAB's arrived? So step one was really focusing outreach and resource sharing, because we knew the word was going to spread fast. And the fastest thing that we could do is try to get information out to the public about how to identify Emerald Ash Borer, what they can do to report sightings, and working from that and then going forward. So first steps were, updating our existing EAB fact sheet. So ODF already had online a great fact sheet, so that's been updated, translated in multiple languages. It's 2022, so social media really has been a way to get the word out and get the word fast. And I definitely spent the first couple of weeks monitoring my social media accounts pretty quickly, and I was really heartened to see the number of organizations that were picking up the resources that were being shared by state agencies and their partners and getting that word out. ODA entomologists did a great job. They already had this EAB or repressive lookalike identification sheet, so we were kind of able to get that quickly branded and online, and I was able to see that that was being shared widely as well, which was really great because we were seeing a lot of false ID reports coming through. So by giving that resource to the public, I think that that's been very helpful for folks to be able to really determine if they really think that they've been seeing EAB. In addition, both ODA and ODF took steps immediately to either create their own web pages specifically geared towards EAB, as in ODA's case, or updating and bringing to the forefront existing EAB web pages, such as with ODF. Next page, please. Other thing to come up was that we were starting to get questions about treatments, and just sort of timely looking through our current response plan. We did not have the most updated review of available pesticides to be used against EAB. So I worked with our pesticide team at the ODA to have that list reviewed, and then we kind of created an external publication list that is available on our ODA EAB webpage. This is available both as a PDF and as a searchable web page that lists all the chemistries that are available, product names, and any of that information. So kind of a next step that we would need to take for this in particular is to start working on outreach and creating outreach materials. And so I'm hoping to touch base with someone at OSU Extension to see how we can go about disseminating this information and making it more clear about what avenues people have if they want to go that route. So this was put together rather quickly, and actually that was really timely because ODF had started hosting town hall meetings where they were targeting the urban forestry community, so they were able to share this resource, and that was put together maybe exactly on that same day. Next slide, please. That's a little smaller than I wanted it to be, but also what we've been asking the public and everyone as a way to consolidate report is we're really taking advantage of the Oregon Invasive Species Hotline, the online hotline report and system. So they report in Invader. So we've been using that to track reports, respond to reports. So I just took a screenshot of a report from last week where you can see that both ODA and ODF have taken time to respond to these reports. And so that's been a collaborative effort between ODA, ODF, and USDA has graciously offered some of their time to help monitor reports and respond to them as much as possible, really relying on public to upload good pictures so we can do a visual assessment and then kind of make a decision from that if an actual on the group boots ground follow-up is needed. And I think, yep, oh, there we go. There's the slide I wanted, such as reiterating what I just said. And to date, most of them have been false reports. The majority of them have been false reports. Again, going back to there are many, many lookalikes for pesticides that are out there. So again, that's why that lookalike guide has been really important and very useful to get out. We have not had any new reports from outside of the known infested area. And by known infested area, I mean in forest grove from around those blocks or where the initial trees were found. And I don't have an updated report as of today, how many reports we've had, but the estimate was as of last week is that there have been about 174 EAB related reports. Not to say that those are positive, just that they were reports that were filed for EAB. So kind of thinking about, this is the slide that I wanted to go to, but yeah, just thinking long-term about what response would look like beyond what we've done immediately is thinking of this as a continuum. This is going to be a collaboration from many different groups. Everyone on this call may have a different objective or different concerns of how they want to go about approaching this. So this is going to take a village, right? And so surveys are definitely going to be a part of that. Surveys to determine the spread, that's something that we've already have ongoing, so I'm going to get to that in a second. And then further along, also identifying release sites for EAB biocontrol, because again, that is an emphasis that both USDA and ODA are going to be putting on place, is identifying trees that we think will be successful for those release sites. And just to note that trapping is a tool. It's not the only tool, but it may be one that is going to assist in continued monitoring. And that's particularly powerful, I think, if we're using that in conjunction with other tips and tricks, such as girdling and trapping trees. And then just making a note that, if and when folks are making recommendations or going to use their traps, the traps are a little tricky to use, and that the lures may not be as effective as they are with other pests that we use, and so that they may work best in areas where you already know that you have higher levels of infestation. But I'm not going to speak to that too much other in depth on that, because that is not my area of expertise. But going back to the survey in particular, our trapping tool that we've been doing. Next slide, please. So we have developed a survey 123 mapping tool. And so Max Ragazzino, who's our biocontrol entomologist, is on the call. So I'm going to pass that over to him to kind of touch on that, to kind of give you a rundown of what that map looks like and how we've been using it. And then some trapping efforts have been started. And I believe that USDA has been placing some traps around some selected areas. And so I'm hoping that Carrie and maybe Mariah Davis from USDA can speak to that. And so with that, you can end screen share, Patrick. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. So I'm not going to attempt to screen share, but for those of you who on the call, you are all the type of stakeholders who we want to involve in the more in-depth visual survey. Visual surveys for emerald ash borer can be just as effective, if not more effective, than trapping for emerald ash borer adults. Visual surveys for ash trees can be done any time of the year. Visual surveys for ash decline, crown dieback, bark splitting where the EAB galleries are, woodpecker damage from where woodpeckers going in and peeling the bark back to get to the emerald ash borer larva under the bark are all good signs to look for during a visual survey. So in order to consolidate that data, we created a Survey 123 tool specifically for trained natural resource cooperators. This is not something to be sent to the public or to the press. This is specifically, we would like them to continue to use the OISC hotline as it is less in-depth, and this way we have our data a little clearer cut. I'll be putting a link to that in the chat in just a second, as well as there is a dashboard that we are finalizing later this week so that you all can see, as you're using this survey 123, you can see where trees have already been surveyed in order to not duplicate work. And I would just like to emphasize that, thank you, Chris. Oh, that is the trap one, that's the wrong link.
Okay, please ignore that link that I just shared. I shared the wrong one.
One second. Here we go. If you are going to an area where you don't have cell service, somewhere that is more remote, you can still use the survey. You just have to use the Survey 123 app, which is a little more in-depth. Otherwise, if you have cell service and have data, you can open it in any mobile browser, Safari, Chrome, or Firefox, all work. And go through this. It's a simple survey. You scroll down and answer each question. It should take, it takes around 10 minutes the first time you're going through it. If you're clicking every link and reading all of the tools and informational material that we've included, but it gets a lot quicker after that. So if you would like to help, if you would like to do something with the visual survey where you just need, where you have members of your team who want to do something, get boots on the ground, this is something that we can do. And if you reach out to me, I'll put my email in the chat. ODF has also offered to help with training people for visual surveys for signs and symptoms of EAB. So we can schedule a workshop in order to train you all on how to use this. Just reach out and we can get that set up for the immediate future. If the recording is not in the notes, then it is oda.fyi/spot-EAB if we send out the recording without notes.
Thank you, Max. And then secondly, in follow up to the Survey 123, so folks have already been using this. I know that the ODF Foresters team have already been using this. I know Max has had some of his technicians using this, and some other audiences this has been shared with. So that information has kind of been pulled through already. This was only finalized about just under 2 weeks ago. So this is still in its early stages, and kind of the development and kind of platform that we used and the questions that we asked was done in collaboration with our partners at ODF. Again, trying to find that balance of what captures baseline information of what we want to know, but then also trying to add some additional description information on top of that. So it should not take very long for folks to fill this survey out. And if you have feedback about the survey, if any of your groups end up using this, we're welcome to hearing that feedback as well, because we want to make this as an effective tool as possible for everyone to use. So that's been what we've had going so far on the survey side. And again, I mentioned that some trapping has been done. So Carrie, can I call on you to kind of walk us through that?
Hi, this is Carrie speaking. I think that didn't you put out just a few traps, Wyatt, right in the beginning when we first, right after it was discovered, and then after that, Mariah with the USDA said that she had the capability of getting some traps out, so I offered to make a map to get us started. I did send the map to you, Patrick, because I can't share my screen. I don't know if we want to share it or not, but I can also put in download links if anyone wants to download it and take a look at it. I can put it in the chat in a few minutes. I thought, well, how would we do this? You know, for Japanese beetle, gypsy moth, it's, you know, pretty standard how we react to a catch, but with a wood-boring beetle, it can be more tricky since we don't really know how long it's been there. And since we're just estimating 3 to 5 years, I thought I'll make a DLIM of, you know, a bunch of square miles, just a grid that goes out 6 miles from the center. And then we just picked randomly, you know, for each trap that the USDA said they could put out, we just chose random squares. Not totally random. I tried to choose the sections that had vegetation or water where we might find ash trees, and then just gave it to them, and they're using it to place traps. And I think they've got quite a few traps out already. And there's also an aerial version of this map too. And since we're placing the traps mid-season, we didn't really, you know, plan them way from the beginning when the first EAB were emerging. You know, we probably can't get that many traps out, and it's not, you know, traps are not the only tool you should be using, and they're not, you know, known to be that effective in finding beetles at low populations. But, you know, if we do catch something, that would be really great information and really helpful. I don't know if, Mariah, if you have anything you want to add to the trapping that's been happening so far.
Sure. Yeah. So we did get out the 16 traps in those grid points, and I can say that it was very easy to find ash trees. There's a lot of ash in the area. We did also do visual surveys using the Survey 123 app. We do still have capacity to put out like another 10 traps if you guys think there's still time to do that. And we also can provide supplies. There's a pretty quick turnaround if other people are wanting to put out traps. And yeah, that's all. Thank you.
So I was thinking for next year, I know Max has already made a tool for keeping track of traps that people place. So if we want to coordinate it a little bit better, we have, you know, a tool to show where the traps are placed if you want to enter them there. I know we're already partway through and have some of the traps placed for this season, but we could use that for next season. And I also have a tool for coordinating, you know, the placement of traps so no one overlaps. I don't know that we'll ever, you know, have that many traps that we're going to put out where we need to coordinate in that way, but we could at least share where the traps are placed, and once they're placed in the state, if we need to do that. You know, this Survey 123 tool is really basic, so it would only keep track of just the sites where the traps are, you know, not the servicing or removals or any specimens that are caught. But just so you know, that could be something we might want to rely on more next season if there's, you know, a lot of traps being placed next year. Does anyone have any questions about the map or Anything else that I talked about?
Sorry, I didn't raise my hand. I don't see the spot to do that. But on the topic of data collection, we do have already through the USDA field maps software, a wood boring beetle data collection tool that includes emerald ash borer. And so we've been collecting all of our data in that, and I'm more than happy to export that and send that to you.
Oh yeah, that would be great. Thanks.
Jerry, this is Rob from Clean Water Services. We would love to get a hold of your DLIM map, and a lot of the properties in the quadrants along the Tualatin River are eminently accessible by ourselves or by other partners. Some of them are already on this call, so you just need to let us know if you want us to lay out your traps with good depths of access.
Okay, that would be great. That's great to know. Thanks.
And we could geo-reference those so you've got them.
Brandy with Tualatin Soil Water Conservation District, I think you have a question.
I do, thank you. I'll just dovetail on what Rob was saying, since Clean Water Services and the SWCD work really closely together. Throughout this whole area that's shown on the map, we have POEs and restoration projects pretty much covering most of that area. Not every square inch or square mile, but we're scattered throughout that entire area. And so we'd be happy to help with survey and trapping, but I think we're looking for a little direction on where to start, where it's important to start looking, just because that is quite a large area, and we want to be efficient and helpful.
Yeah, the traps are kind of a lot of work to service, but I would think the visual survey using Max's survey 123 would probably be something that could be done, anytime, especially for the holes in the trees. You could look for those even later in the season.
As far as geographically goes, emerald ash borer unfortunately is patchy. What it not only spreads, it can fly 12 to 15 miles a year, but if somebody had infested firewood and say stopped at the let's say they stopped at the elementary school for an overnight and then went on to another park nearby or another area, or just parked along the side of the road, it could have been kind of like breadcrumbs scattering an introduction. So unfortunately, we don't know if there could be another hot spot like the parking lot at the elementary school somewhere else without a corridor of infested ash and, to connect them.
I also don't see how to raise hands. Sorry, I will Google that after this. But one thing I might posit is for folks like Brandy that have the capability to set traps and they're looking for what key areas should they be trapping in. Obviously, they need to look at where trapping is already taking place. But in my mind, key areas would be areas where ash is already a little bit stressed because they're automatically going to be more preferred or sought out by emerald ash borer. And then what eastern states have seen is that spread tends to be faster where you actually have more dispersed ash rather than a nice cluster of ash where they can just kind of hunker down in that area. If they just have spotty ash, they tend to disperse more readily from that area. And so we might want to zero in on those more dispersed areas rather than what would be common sense to go towards like a whole string of ash along a riparian area. But those are just my two thoughts. And obviously focusing on areas that we're most concerned about having EAB damage. So I'd actually like some input from the other experts on this call on your thoughts there, where they should be targeting their traps.
Christina, can I respond to you real quick? This is Rob again. I think one thing to think about, the string, this body ash is going to be hard to find within this map, especially along the Tualatin River, where Brandy and my organization have a lot of access agreements. So those are going to be big contiguous stretches of riparian and wetland, just full of big ash groves. So are you saying we should stay out of those spots for looking? Or I mean, there are also going to be beaver stress trees in there, you know, woodpecker utilization, normal ash wear and tear. And I'm just wondering, like, sorry, I'm having a hard time organizing my thought here, but the East Coast or Midwest examples of ash would have been ash that are more mixed woodland ash trees, correct? Whereas here we've got like 60, 70, even 80% cover of ash in riparian areas and wetlands. So I'm wondering if that would make a difference with ash or dispersal or colonization.
Yeah, I would assume it likely would, just those differences that we have there. And I want to make really clear, these are just ideas I'm positing. I'm not giving you folks direction. It's really up to ODA to provide that guidance in terms of where they think those traps should be targeted in. These are just ideas that I'm positing towards the larger group that I think getting at Brandy's specific question, which is where should they put traps? So those are my ideas of where they should put traps. Can we hear from ODA, APHIS, anybody else that has any input there?
Yeah, this is Wyatt from ODF. And at ODF, we signed a cooperative agreement for statewide trapping for EAB with APHIS from 2013 to 2015. And we placed over 1,000 traps in Oregon ash across Oregon. And yours truly right here has set hundreds of traps in ash trees all across Western Oregon. And my record is 16 traps in one day, by the way. So it is labor intensive. The purple traps are messy. We did both purple and green funnel traps. But I want to mention that the APHIS protocol with phenology, the APHIS protocol is 16-week survey program. And so we targeted to get our traps up at the end of April or the 1st of May. They're set, they're 8 weeks. You come and check them. These are for the purple traps, and then another 8 weeks until the end of the season. So that's from May 1st till the end of August. So right now we have 4 weeks where there potentially could be adults flying around, but we're past the peak, getting into the tail. And some of this is really good discussion, but I would think about where we're going to trap for next year. That's what I would suggest, and maybe we could have that conversation a little bit more fine-tuned at a later date. But there's only 4 weeks left of the survey season, essentially.
Yeah, I agree with you, Wyatt. I think that, we're getting close to everything's tapering off, and I was just showing the map kind of just to show what we did this year, and so everyone can think about what we might do next year.
So what do we tell Brandy for this year?
So this year,
I'm driving at it. What do we tell her?
I'll just clarify too. We're mostly interested in surveying at this point. Like Wyatt said, I think we're hoping to help more with the survey 1, 2, 3 and actually looking for the signs and symptoms on the trees at our projects versus trapping.
Right, and I think I kind of covered that initially in my slides with the caveat that as much as possible, the visual surveys are going to be more effective than just setting all of our hats into one basket and saying that the answer is to do a wide spread trapping effort, and that's what folks are going to be doing. And we just discussed this. It was a little late in the season because by the time we found this, the beetles were already flying. So I think that's, again, we did the trapping because that was kind of a quick response that we could do just to see what we could find, just to see what was out there, to see how effective that would be. But if we're going to do trapping, that will have to be a larger conversation with more collaboration to see where people are willing to put the traps out. Yeah, go ahead.
So for the visual survey, if you're looking for a geographic place to start, I would say close to the ground zero. If at the properties that you have access for, starting at ground zero and circling outward from there for moving outward as you survey. Like I said, it can be patchy with miles of range, but right now we do only know that there is one positive zone, one ground, one hotspot of EAB. So circling outward from there would be, I guess, my recommendation.
And
right now,
Max, folks should talk to you about what's already been covered or through your.
There'll be a dashboard coming out like in the next day or two. I just need to figure out one last bug with the JS Online dashboard. So in order to prevent duplication of work, you can open that up, see where has already been surveyed for. It'll show as a green point on the map if there's no EAB, yellow point if you marked it as a suspect tree, red point if you have detected EAB or sea beetles or larvae or galleries. And that will update live. So the minute you put it in, it'll be up. So that way you can know that, say, this particular area is not already surveyed. Just you can zoom in and see, if there's no points on this street, you can just go down the street and survey, use the 123 app. And then if, say, another group, let's say ODA, we're sending out surveyors, we see, oh, that's already been done, can direct them to go elsewhere. That is coming soon. I just hit a snag on it this morning, so it wasn't ready for this meeting. A lot of little permission things with JS Online.
Max, do you want to mention biocontrol and efforts that should go on now to get ready for biocontrol season? Because December 1st is a deadline to get new sites figured out for 2023 for APHIS.
That is part of this survey 123. What we're going to use that data for is to identify sites that we're going to release the biological control agents at. They are widely used in the East Coast, and they are showing real efficacy now. There is a species, Spathia scaleni, that is relatively new in the EAB program that is shown to actually be capable of suppressing EAB populations and naturally spreading with the infestation, working in concert with an older parasitoid, Tetrastrachus planopanesi, and the egg parasitoid Oobius. We're working with USDA Brighton, the Brighton lab, Michigan lab, which is where they rear all the parasitoids. We're working with them right now to get a release in this year if they have agents, if we can identify a site. There's a lot of caveats on that, but regardless, next year we will be identifying sites to release the biocontrol agents at in order to get releases in as quickly as possible. Because we know we have a population, we know that there are larvae present.
With those efforts, is there time this year to identify any sites that could be marked for release next year?
That's what we're hoping. We're hoping that we can find some sites this year. There is still time. Eggs are laid. So when the beetles fly from the tree, they lay their eggs, which hatch relatively quickly. So we're likely not going to be releasing the egg parasitoid, but the larval parasitoids parasitize the later stages of the larvae. So those later stages of the larvae are present through the late summer, fall, and from very preliminary things, I suspect some proportion of the population may be present through the winter, as they are in a lot of the New England states, in having a 2-year life cycle, which would be good for Oregon's potential biocontrol programs. And I'm rambling into the details of the biocontrol program. We can talk about that later. But I believe Robert, you had a question.
Yeah, thanks, Max. Well, we've got property full of ash trees within that 1 mile bullseye at Fernhill Wetlands. So if you want to use initial biocontrol release, feel free. We've got it right there. And I know that we can get permission to release it on a couple of neighboring properties owned by Metro as well, where we have access agreements and lots of cooperation on this topic. But back to the question of survey. Let me just take it back a second here. So maybe it would help just asking if we could take that delimitation map and shrink it down to the appropriate scale that you would suggest doing survey at, like maybe draw a closer in 1 mile zone or 2 mile zone, whatever you want for that area, and then release the dogs of survey into there. Because again, the SWCD and Clean Water and Metro all have a lot of land around there, and I know the city of Forest Grove sits right in the middle. So you have, 4 partners willing or able, at least most of us able to get in there right away and start survey. But we need to have a kind of a clear bullseye where to go. And the bigger map was fantastic that Carrie put together, but if that's going to be too scattershot, and given what Christine was suggesting about straggler ash versus ash thicket, ash forest, I'm just wondering if you want to give us something more specific and let us go, we'll hit it.
So I've noted that, Rob, that's a request you had from this meeting. And I think Wyatt and Carrie and Max can put their heads together to make some more detailed assignments related. And Max's dashboard should show what's already been covered. And so Christina will get that in the notes as an action item. Urgent action item.
Yeah, thanks Carrie for the map. That's real helpful for us. We just need to, I think it sounds like the gridding for survey needs to be tighter. The gridding for trapping can be a little bit wider. And since trapping is something to plan for a season ahead, that we want to plan for that next season, starting this fall. But the survey work could start immediately.
Sure. And thank you, Robert, for that input. I just will iterate that we did put that tool together rather quickly, again, just to have something to get in people's hands, because we were getting requests of saying, we want to survey now. And we didn't ask, where are you surveying? What's your objective? We just said, okay, here's something that you can use tomorrow, right? That was what the goal was now. So this is great feedback. And if anybody else has any other feedback for that, that's why we're having this meeting, right?
Yeah. We also, in addition to staff, our plan was to train up a bunch of our contractors who are all natural resources professionals. Many of them have a background in arboriculture as well, or forestry. And they do a lot of the revegetation work and restoration and weed management and work on these partners projects out there in that zone, the SWCD, Clean Water Services, and Metro Land. And so I wonder if you want to consider, and also thinking the cities, the 2 cities here that I can think of, particularly Laura Trunk's work with City of Hillsborough. So same group of contractors and same kinds of skill sets. We were planning in August and September to do Oregon Forest Pest Detector trainings for those folks and pay them for their time to do that training, and then release them out there to do incidental survey if they could. But I'm a little concerned that might be more hodgepodge if you want to be very targeted about this, and I would love to hear your feedback. Again, kind of how to focus the effort.
I don't think that, at least in these early stages, if that's what you're looking to do now, I don't think a hodgepodge approach is bad, because we know that this has probably been here for long enough, and we know what the flight radius is, that they aren't discriminatory, and the beetles have probably flown longer than maybe outside of this immediate area that we're focusing. But again, I will defer to someone who's a little more well-versed in that, but just based on what I've been learning at this point, that doesn't seem to be an inappropriate approach.
And I think this is something that once I can get the dashboard in your guys' hands, then you can see where's just individual trees that have been surveyed. Just, I think hodgepodge is honestly as good a survey as any. I think like with the Portland street tree inventory, I know that I was using that with one of my technicians, and that is a wonderful tool that, you know, a lot of people in the Portland area can use to look at the trees that they know where they are, but that doesn't exist elsewhere, obviously. As was sent to me in a direct, Jim Gershowitz asked if, you know, if worst case scenario, if someone surveys their tree this year and it's healthy and they find nothing, and next year they find early signs of EAB, we've got 1 year of background data of tree health. So I think if we, I see Karen's raised her hand.
Well, I didn't mean to interrupt you, Max, but it just seems like hodgepodge is okay. We're hearing that clearly, but the important thing is you don't repeat areas that other people are doing it this season, and the people that are doing it are adequately trained. And I think, so let's have a sort of a subcommittee or an action item to develop some kind of quick training that these folks, in addition to, you know, Max, I think you mentioned it, a training on how to obtain the Survey 123, how to use it, and we'll figure out a way to get it to your people, Rob.
Yeah, so I can jump in real quick about training. So I think Rob mentioned Dan Stark and I are going to be working with Brandy Safel to do a big OFPD, Oregon Forest Pest Detector training here in mid-August, and potentially another one in early September. And then also around that same time, Dan Stark and I and Dave Shaw are going to be putting together a big pest scene investigator workshop for our master woodland managers, who are people who've gone through at least 80 hours of essentially, you know, a quick forestry bachelor's. And so those will be from my 3 counties, basically the entire northwest corner of the state, down to Polk and Lynn County with Brad with Robinson. So we're doing that, and then, you know, happy to add how to use the 123 tool, because yeah, well, a little hesitant because, yeah, it's public, but also there are people to, you know, if we, you know, I get a call from Southern Yamhill, I'm going to send them down there to be like, hey, MWM, you know. So
what I will say is, if you get a call from someone in Southern Yamhill who's just a call, it's a call, send them to the OSC hotline.
Yeah, that's what yeah, that's what we've been doing.
And we should continue to do that. The Survey 123 tool is for people who, I know that when I originally sent this out to a smaller group of some of you who were on the call, I offered training, and I know a lot of it is, well, Wyatt's been training me on how to ID EAB signs and symptoms for 3 or 4 years now. So if you guys have had this training, the Survey 123 is very straightforward. You open it, it's a form fillable question, or, you know, select all which one applies. So the training for how to use the Survey 123 is going to be a very brief portion of how do you survey for EAB, but it will automatically detect your location when you press the map on the web browser. You can put in an address. It's nice and straightforward.
So Max, it seems like Alex and Brandy and ourselves, we've all been talking about setting up these trainings. We were focusing on professionals who we've already got in the fold, and actually we're paying for them to take the course. Like we were actually gonna hit up some of the folks in the pesticides division, see if we could get CEUs for some of those guys, because they are all applicators as well. But now that's an aside. The main point is it's a different audience than the general public, but then there is a huge general public component, and I don't have any problem segmenting the two audiences into hotline. I put a lot of years into hotline stuff myself, and then the professionals. But it would be really key, I think, to have those audiences segmented out for these trainings, and clearly, I don't know if you want to give us kind of a quick written summary or bullets, like who do you want doing survey 1, 2, 3 versus anybody else with the hotline, just so we can make sure we get them access to it and that they have the right tool at their fingertips. They're contractors again, and they're out and about, and they're going to be able to follow the dashboard and the survey instrument. And they've all got, GPS generally in their disposal. But
yeah, that's a good question.
Make sure I get that right.
Yeah, if you're OFPD certified trained, do you get lumped into the hotline or the 1, 2, 3? I think is a good. That'd be nice to know.
We can work on those edge cases, but I think in the end, if they are someone who is a professional, professional who is being given a training course to supplement their existing training in knowing what a sick tree looks like, other than just, well, my tree looks kind of bad. If it is a supplemental course, I don't see why we shouldn't include them. It's really just, I really want to stress that we do not want 174 reports of Japanese beetle, green stink bug. We don't want to include maple trees in the ash survey. So it's really just, I don't want to be overly strict with I don't want to be too overly strict about who we're sending this to, as to hurt our chances of detecting EAB, but I also don't want to be getting maples in the survey. So I think we can all agree with that, and I'll work out exactly who we should send this to, but I think we're all more or less on the same page.
Thanks, Max. Thanks, everybody, for good discussion on that survey and the situation report. I know, Dr. Williams, you've got some work, some stuff to share about what you guys have been doing up to date as well. And I know some of our agenda, we've bleeded into some of our operational logistical needs a little bit already, but it's good discussion. So Dr. Williams, and I think I've got a couple things to share on the screen for you.
All right, thank you. And I'll be brief. I have a one pager here and then a table to show. I don't know if you can increase the size of that. It's kind of small on my end. But I just want to stress, while Patrick's getting that going, that we are so appreciative of the group collective effort here, and just really proud of our partners at all levels, and the knowledge and the passion, the expertise you all bring. And so I'm personally proud to be part of that group, and I'd like to thank everyone within ODF as well. And I'm just going to try to go through this, I don't know, in a nutshell, try to capture all of what ODF has done in the time since the detection. But yeah, just kind of going down the bullet points, we've been responding to hotline reports, emails, phone calls, the initial report on June 30th. And so a lot of time responding to that. And just more on that in a second. I got new figures from Lindsay Wise that she sent to Chris and I about the hotline reports. Early on, we coordinated with ODA on press releases about the initial discovery. So proud of that interagency collaboration and getting the news out there in a timely fashion. And I can't even keep track of how many media interviews we did. And so thanks to the PIOs, Jim and Andrea from ODA for helping us, helping the technical specialist navigate all that. Jim also has been working with Andrea to develop a communications plan specific for Forest Grove and EAB detection. And so that's in draft form, just been working on it the last 24 hours. So this is modeled after our 2016 spongy moth eradication, formerly known as Asian gypsy moth eradication in Portland. Some of you on the call might have been involved with that. It's a very similar successful template for communications across a large incident such as this. It was already mentioned, ODF hosted an open house or a town hall type of field tour at Joseph Gale on July 20th. About 30 representatives from various local agencies came to see what it looked like on the ground. And so we answered a lot of questions there. Really, really proud of Max and Carrie for developing that survey 123. It's just so useful going forward. For those of you who have managed GIS data, it's really, really nice to start on the right foot with the survey. And kudos to ODA for pushing that out. And I know there's several dozen or maybe over 100 trees now. I lost count how many trees have been checked within the first couple hours, first couple days, excuse me. For trapping, yeah, we did set some initial traps. Those traps were removed with the trees at the school and the park. So we don't have any traps up right now, but we did provide some traps to local entities like Clean Water Services. And we do have some traps in our supplies, but we don't have the personnel. We don't have a forest management technician. We do have a local office there in Forest Grove. So we might be able to have some assistance hanging traps in the local area there, but kind of scattered. Like I said, we started an internal ODF EAB coordination group, and that's with Forest Health, our urban and community forestry program, public affairs, our Forest Grove office there, and also our state forest division. So Tillamook and Clatsop State Forest are kind of close by. So we have our state forest staff meeting with us internally every 2 weeks. We developed a stakeholder and client list, and so far it's over 140 contacts with local groups, industry groups, officials. So we're maintaining that. It's our stakeholder list. We've helped with this agenda item and also an agenda item for the September Board of Forestry. So the Board of Forestry is interested in this and what kind of impacts are going to come to state and private forests in Oregon. We helped with Agenda Day. We submitted incident command system forms to ODA in assistance for managing an incident similar to a wildfire format. We have a statewide risk map that was developed for the readiness and response plan. And we've been providing that to cooperators. And I'm going to put it in the chat right now. It's an ArcGIS online tool. So you can go here to see the viewer. And then if you're interested in getting the GIS layer, you can email me and I'll send it to you in a zip folder. But that is the EAB risk map that was developed for Oregon, and that's an ODF product. So we've been sharing that. Behind the scenes, we've been starting to coordinate on a firewood committee. So this is more kind of the long-term outreach effort for the dangers of moving firewood within Oregon, and reached out to the Nature Conservancy and the Don't Move Firewood campaign, as well as coordinating with ODA, Forest Service, and state parks for getting some new materials. So that's in development. And then for our urban forestry program, and Scott has been doing a tremendous job on these last few bullet points right here. Hosted an informational webinar and a Q&A session for Tree City USA communities. And outreach to Forest Grove city staff. Scott also toured a site in Marion County for large-scale urban wood and woody biomass utilization. So that's in Marion County, but we're already starting to think ahead towards Washington County and what a site would be like for marshaling and holding infested ash or questionable infested ash. Scott also met with board members from Oregon Community Trees, for EAB response and recovery, as well as other groups such as the Oregon Landscape Contractors Board and the Pacific Northwest chapter of the ISA. And we're trying to engage professionals about EAB in the area. So that's like a real quick snapshot what we've been doing. And also, Patrick, can you show that second page? So Chris mentioned there was 176 hotline reports as of July 26. And as of today, that number is now 191. And Lindsay Wise, who is with Portland State University administers the online hotline. And that's something that all the agencies that I know of have been pushing for the public to report suspect EAB. And so this is this histogram captures how many reports, 191, since the initial news release on the 11th of July. So it's kind of tailing off, but we're still getting reports daily. And that is the end of my report. And my fellow ODF colleagues are still on the line. If I miss anything, please chime in. Oh, Dave Shaw just commented. I want to also say big thanks to OSU. They quickly got together a couple of very handy outreach, and I don't want to steal their thunder here if they're on the agenda, but just thank you for helping. Thank you from OSU for helping get these guides out for identifying ash and the pocket guides for pest detectors. Thank you for the speedy response.
Thank you, Dr. Wyatt. I do have a note on my agenda here to call on Jim from ODF to talk about the communications kind of going forward. Jim, do you kind of want to share what you guys have been?
Yeah, if everyone can hear me, I think Wyatt had mentioned before that there was a communication plan being developed based on the spongy moth from a few years back. I did go over that and review it, and one big difference for people to keep in mind is that the strategy with AGM was eradication, and so a lot of the messaging was around just letting people know, here's what we're doing, stay tuned, it's going to be eradicated. And it was successfully eradicated. So the messaging is a little different now, or quite a bit different, because that's not the strategy. It's more slow the spread. And so we're kind of moving into a different set of messaging. So right now it's at the point where we're kind of trying to see if that plan is going to work for ODA as the lead convener, if they can accept that. It does call for a ODA as the lead agency to convene a inner working group of communications people in the different agencies and interagency communications working group that I believe Andrea is trying to put together that. We've offered to be on that. I was chatting with Jennifer Alexander at OSU Extension. They're going to be doing a lot of the communication as well. Colleagues at Forest Service and the federal level, APHIS, probably having their communications people on that so that we can take a look. But predominantly that communication plan is designed to capture all the different audiences in Oregon that we want to be communicating with at various levels. It was already mentioned, some are inner professionals that have certain kinds of things we want to talk to them about. Then there's the general public, there's reporters, and even within the media, there's like science media, and then there's general lay media. And then of course the whole urban forestry audience versus conservation group. So we're trying to get our arms around all the different communication needs for all those different audiences, and then look at what are the vehicles that we have collectively across all of our agencies to target to those folks. So in some cases, that's going to be things like the classes that were mentioned that OSU Extension is going to be offering. There'll be outreach to landowners, and this is going to roll out over several years. So one of the things we're also envisioning is a timeline of communication opportunities. So the first time that there is a verified finding in a new county or in a new incorporated city, that triggers another set of potential communication opportunities that we can use to remind people all the standardized messages about let's slow the spread by not transporting firewood from where it was cut. or if you're going to transport it, make sure it's properly treated, and what are those messages. So that's essentially all kind of what we're trying to capture in this big communication plan. But the takeaway for the audience here today, I think, is we want to have a consistency of messaging so that the public gets the same set of facts. We don't want to be dealing with different numbers, or, you know, how many calls are we getting if that number starts to change from one audience to the other. So as people have the opportunity to communicate with their own audiences, we kind of like to have a base that people can go back to. And I believe right now for the state agencies who've been using Teams as a place where we can put the communication tools. So we'll put media coverage up there so you can see kind of what's been said. If there's corrections to media coverage, we've already had one instance where there was something was misstated in the media. But those key messages will evolve over time, but we would like people to at least review those so that they can feel like, okay, I'm being consistent in my messaging with what's being said in the whole state. Now, you're not going to use every message with every audience, and you might have to expand on those messages as you deal, for example, with people that are going to be out doing survey 1, 2, 3 are going to have a more detailed level of messaging, let's say, than just the general public. But as appropriate, using those as kind of a centralized way that we can know that if you're out talking about this subject, we know pretty much what you're saying. And that way it can expand the number of people that are essentially up to speed and competent to communicate. As you get, obviously there's a lot of questions, and we know from our urban and community folks that they were getting questions that weren't coming into the state. And so we wanted to make sure that they were also a part of getting these answers, or these questions and what we believe to be the answers out to people. So that's the other way this communication plan will serve as sort of a repository of what you can send out to your local partners for more detailed responses that they may want to give to their audiences. And ultimately then, this tool we hope will serve as with an adjunct where we'll track who has communicated about what. So we'll know, are we missing any audiences? Have we, how are we doing with our Spanish speaking audiences? Do we have, we prepared enough materials for them? So we want to make sure we're doing this in an equitable way and tracking who's communicated what, where, when. In 3 or 4 years, we'll have to look back and say, okay, was the public well prepared? That's one of the objectives. Did the public know what was coming? Did that help them plan at the local level for the impacts? And that's the whole purpose of having a communication plan, to make sure people are as armed as best as possible for what's coming. And Andrea, ODA is the lead. She couldn't be here today, so she'd asked me to just sort of present that to her, but we are partnering closely with ODA as the lead convener for that group.
Like good cooperation going on. And it sounds like ODA and ODF both have plenty of staff capacity to handle just about everything, right? That was kind of a joke, but that kind of leads into more of our logistics in terms of, you know, what do you, as the two agencies kind of helping to lead the effort, need from the rest of us? How is your capacity actually looking? And I know a little bit later, we'll get into how a few other agencies have some resources to help, but wanted to bring that question up first before we go into everything else.
Well, just before I depart on this, I think the only thing that as the communications working group would want to know is, as agencies develop robust outreach and education programs, we'd love to know what those are so those can be captured. And I was hearing some from OSU, you know, Master Woodlander classes and things like that. It'd be very helpful for us to be able to roll those efforts in so they're not lost at the, you know, individual level in the flurry of all those activities. We'd like to be able to capture those so that we can also say that audience has been addressed by OSU, by ODA, by, you know, whoever's communicating that. So that's probably how you funnel that, whether you give that to Wyatt or Chris Beneman at the state level, and they can get it to the communications people. I'll kind of leave it up to the operations people how they decide to do that. But the communications working group would like to know what's going on so that we can help harm people, so that anyone who has to give a media interview can say, well, there's a lot going on right now, and be able to fairly represent the broad field of activity.
Thanks, Jim. I do have a question on legislative outreach. I know the press release, the two agencies has already gone out to most of the legislators. We at the Invasive Species Council have already been working with some of the legislative folks, particularly the committees around agriculture and natural resources, to do some sort of an informational hearing in September about the council and the information hub that we just released. But this would also obviously be another kind of key issue. I guess before we tread on anybody else, to include that in kind of our request for them, has there already been inquiries or anything like that from the legislators to do anything like that coming up?
So Patrick, what do you mean by exact? Because this is the first I'm hearing of this. So could you elaborate a little bit on exactly what that discussion has been thus far?
Sure, yeah, it hasn't gone very deeply so far, but basically the legislature will meet for committee hearings in September and also in December. And the OISC, well, at the time, the chair, when we started talking about it, was Troy Abercrombie and Christine Moffitt, and a few other folks that have been involved in some of the legislative activities to try to do an informational hearing just on the OISC in general and the information hub. So we have already kind of had those, that in the works to do with the legislature during one of those committee hearing days. Obviously now with the EAB issue, we could elevate this issue up with legislators in coordination with the rest of the OISC discussion. So, I mean, we're happy to do that, but again, I don't want to tread if either one of the agencies have already been in contact with any folks from the legislature.
Okay, thank you for that. No, ODA has not reached out at this point, but kind of our next step is kind of using that next window to provide e-board requests, because that window is coming up. So that was part of my personal objective, was to kind of understand from this meeting, hearing from all of you present, help kind of put that bid, if you will, in that monetary ask for support, because that is kind of the thing, is saying what is the ODA, what are we calling it, capacity at this point. So I'll just be clear, ODA does not have a reservoir of staff to pull out to just dedicate people to be 100% EAB going forward. We are the responsible agency for multiple pest emergency responses across the state and ongoing survey work that we do to keep our markets open. So that still remains a big chunk of what we will be doing, but there are aspects, again, like the biocontrol, that we are kind of using as a 2-for-1, so we can kind of survey in efforts for identifying biocontrol sites, but also be using that as a survey to supplement other information about where known infestations are being found, which then we can happily share that information, as well as trying to be able to help provide unity for communication and other outreach availabilities. But some of that will be needed to be funded by external funds.
Thanks, Kristen. Yeah, I think you hit it on the emergency board request. I mean, I think that's whatever we can do to support you in that would be.
So I think anything that the council can do is just, yes, like you said, bringing that to the forefront, because I think repetition is how we get the message across. So if you're making that signboard, we're doing our part. And again, if anybody else has contacts there, the more support we can get for highlighting why this is important. And beyond just EAB, right? Part of the issue here, and I know I've talked to Jake about this, and we've talked a lot about this at ODA internally, is that we fail to get support on a legislative level for getting funding for early detection rapid response work, right? So when things like this happen, we didn't have that emergency money pool to just pull out and just say, here's our team, we're ready to hit the ground running. I'm not saying that I'm going to see that support coming tomorrow or anytime soon, But I'm just putting that out there. It's just a message that all of us have some way to help get that to the right people. And maybe someday that'll be something that we can get, because they have that support for other things. I was just talking to Jake today. Right now we have the avian influenza virus outbreak, and there's the other one that I can't remember the name of, but the rabbit thing that's happening right now. And so at the state level, we have an emergency response funding source to address those issues for when it comes to animal and human health situations. But when it comes to plant pest disease issues, we kind of lack that support in that arena. So that's just my soapbox. I'll get off of it, but I just wanted to flag that.
Yeah, Chris, I think that's a really good point. And yeah, we will, since we've already been talking to some of the legislative committee folks about OISC in general, I think we'll add in, the urgency of EAB and see if that'll help up the exposure that we get with them. So I'll keep folks informed, because we'll need to bring in some of you all as experts to chat with folks.
And Patrick, we're happy to, at least on the ODF side, help with reviewing any of the presentations based on the communication plan and things like that. So we do legislative days in the forestry department every year, for fire and other things. So let us know. We want to be supportive of whatever the OISC is presenting to the legislature, so we can make sure that also that'll be helpful, because in case anybody else is talking to a legislature, they'll know what they've been hearing at those hearings, so that other people can say, oh yes, that's true.
Great, thanks, Jim. Rob?
Yeah, I was going to say, Patrick and colleagues at ODA, one piece to emphasize would be to discuss the angle of fish and aquatic health, water quality. It's easy to make the connection, since we have 65% riparian cover, 70, even 80% riparian cover in the Willamette Valley. So very logical connection with aquatic resources and fish and ESA listed species. So if you just plumb the depths of folks here, I'm sure you could find some good information to discuss the really big prurient interest of the state in the health of fisheries and in the health of water quality, actually, which, since there's a lot of drinking water pulled out of the Willamette and the tributaries.
Thanks, Rob. Those are good points. There's a couple things that the legislature cares about. It's water and fish. So I think making sure that we highlight some of that is important. So on my list here, I'm seeing we've covered a lot of this. I do have a note from Rob Hamrick at Metro to talk about some disposal efforts. Rob, do you mind chiming in?
Yeah, hi, thank you. Just real quick, I am the Integrated Pest Management Program Manager for Metro, but Metro also manages our solid waste in the region. We have broad authority over solid waste, and the Japanese beetle project, we were late in the game, but what ODA discovered is that Metro had authority to quarantine yard debris, and then also to write some permits and some changes in the Hillsborough landfill to allow for wet waste and an exemption, and we directly bury Japanese beetle yard debris in the Hillsborough landfill. Landscapers and commercial haulers dump the debris at Best Buy in town in Hillsborough, and then that's directly to the landfill on a daily basis. So my question one is, where was that trees disposed of, and how were they disposed of? And two, I believe that we should maybe talk to our solid waste regulators at Metro and look at a program to do the same for EAB. I don't necessarily understand their life cycles like I do the Japanese beetle at this point, but it might be something to consider and something we should think about on disposal methods when we start to identify these trees.
Yeah, thank you, Robert, for that. Yeah, that's exactly right. That is kind of like this next phase that we're getting into now. So kind of like I said, our first concern was just getting word out, getting resources, doing the outreach. Now we're actually kind of doing in more of the implementation part, which clearly is going to be, okay, great. Now that we're telling people to go out and find the trees, what are they going to be doing with the wood? So that is this next step. I think being able to identify the marshaling yards, or if compost is an option. I know that that is a direction that other states have gone through using baseline recommendations. Again, we don't need to recreate the wheel. That was a part of the USDA pest program when they developed for EAB, which had parameters for how to appropriately dispose of wood. So we can lean on that. Just kind of part, again, on the agenda here was to kind of try to identify partnerships and subcommittees to kind of tackle all of these various parts of this puzzle. And so clearly wood waste is one of them. To answer specifically your question about the trees that were chipped, they were chipped and piled and then tarped and secured, so that it remains on site. They have not been moved, and part of that was because we did not have in advance something identified where to dispose of that wood. Right, do you have something to say?
Yeah, it's just at ODF, we have an interest in joining a wood utilization subcommittee. And that's been a concern from us inside the agency, but also our stakeholders and clients in an effort to slow the spread to participate in that committee work. And interestingly, in the statewide plan, there's 2 pages on this, page 37 and 38. And it talks about also having a list of tree removal resources, like contractors in the area. So getting a working list of the contractors in the area that are available to help out, and then, yeah, securing private or public areas for wood marshaling. So we do have a template of some things we need to do, and that's one of the things that ODF wants to help out with as well.
Great. Thank you for that, Wyatt. So I guess since we're on the topic of wood waste, this if there's anybody else who's kind of interested in that and kind of wants to, at least at preliminary basis, kind of stick their head in the game for being involved in those conversations. I know there wasn't anyone from DEQ on the call, I believe, but I had talked to Bob Barrows, who was with that agency, and that they had reached out about asking for guidelines as well.
This is Max Regan. I'd just like to say the primary life stage of concern with wood waste is the pre-pupal to pupal stage, which is the overwintering stage, and which is when disposing of infested trees, particularly ones, well, because we don't know the life cycle of EAB, we can't say when the pupae will all be gone. Some EAB most EAB undergo a 1-year life cycle where they pupate they dig their pupal chamber in the late fall, and then spend the winter inside the pupal chamber, and then emerge in this late spring. But we don't know how many of those spend 2 years in the tree in Oregon, some percentage. So that's the life stage that we are most concerned about, because if there are eggs, well, if we cut a tree down and chip it, there's eggs on a wood chip. They need to dig into the tree, so those eggs would not survive. But so that's why we want to chip a tree, because we're worried about the pupal life stage.
Max, is there any thoughts about if people want to start utilizing the wood for some kind of wood product, what we're gonna, is that gonna follow like quarantine regulations? Or I don't know what the possibility of that. The kind of ironic thing is that when you go to the silviculture guides for Oregon ash, they say the most common thing it's used for is firewood. So, which is pretty sad. But there may be some interest in somehow utilizing this wood, and I think it's going to be important that we have some kind of guidelines for that.
Yeah, we absolutely do. Biologically, you got to cook it.
I see. Okay, so it's heat treatment.
It's in the wood. The pupae dig into the actual wood, into the actual tree itself. The larvae are
right.
Yeah, so it's
I see.
Cannot just debark a tree and call it clean. There will still be EAB.
I concur with Max, and I think we need to get a working committee on this, because another technique would be to keep it on site, like within a quarantine area, any wood that's harvested and covered, and wait for a year. And all the adults will emerge. Once the wood's dried out, they're not going to be suitable habitat for breeding EAB. So there's other things besides, definitely barking alone is not going to help. It needs to be chipped, heat treated, or you can also wait and cover it and not move it. So there's another option there too.
I would say wait and cover. If we're going to wait and cover, it needs to be 2 years. The proportion of EAB that undergo a 2-year life cycle is higher in some states and some reports than others. I would be very, very uncomfortable waiting only 1 year post felling.
Yeah, some the people that we're talking to were wondering about mobile sawmills and moving sawmills into an area and milling ash into lumber on site and drying it there on site for a period of time, covered. And so I'd like to see some more like science-based answers to that question, and maybe not the best time right now to answer that, but to form a committee, again, like a science team committee or something like that, about wood waste and wood utilization.
Yeah, and there are a couple of like kind of outside the box ideas that might not be feasible on a larger scale due to just not having the infrastructure for this. But in some other states, they've utilized like forestry equipment, fellers, bunchers, harvesters, et cetera, to do kind of a mass roundup in a certain area. Could cut costs rather than going about it the type of like arborist way, just doing it on a larger scale. So that's one idea. And then I'd also heard that other states had success with basically doing what we do with our timber that we're using for structural wood and just throwing it into a log pond. And I know that we don't want to transport, but for example, we got Stimson lumber not that far down the road from the infestation area. Could we possibly utilize some resources such as that down the road?
I think a cross-functional work group on that would be great for getting those standards set out. And I know USDA can offer probes for inspectors that want to set up on the state side kiln certification process. So APHIS does certify for European gypsy moth and others for those kiln standards. However, those standards are lower thresholds than what's advised for emerald ash borer. And since USDA APHIS no longer regulates EAB, we do not set that standard. So that's why we can provide the kilns, or not the kilns, we can provide the probes to the state for that certification.
Well, that's great. Oh, excuse me. I just wanted to finish. We do have the Oregon Wood Innovation Center at Oregon State University, and they have information about ash on their website. It would probably behoove us to, move fairly quickly to, amend some of what they have on their website to, state what some of the issues are with ash. So anyway, we'll get on that.
If I can quickly put a plug in for thinking beyond millable wood as well, I think this might be a useful catalyst for making some of the technologies for producing biochar feasible. This influx of woody biomass. Currently, we don't have the bulk to make things pencil out, but this could be a driver that will enable us to get there, especially with biochar production. So just want to put a placeholder there.
I was going to ask, since we're on the subject of wood and not moving wood, is maybe this is a question for Chris or Max or somebody at ODA, but when does the quarantine zone come down and become something we can now direct people to and respond within?
Yeah, that's a really great question. That was also on the agenda, so I'm glad that you brought it up. So you're right, we are looking at implementing, at this point, it would just be a temporary quarantine. So by temporary in our world, that's 180 days. We're not jumping the gun and implementing a permanent quarantine at this point, because part of the thing when you're creating a quarantine, you need to know what exactly the boundary is of what you're working with. Also, because if it turns out, because remember, we're still in early days right now, so we have really, it's all evidence-based. And what do we know? What we know right now, we have the center hotspot within the city limits of Forest Grove, and that's all we know. We don't know how widespread this is. So to the best of our working knowledge, given the information we have, we know that this is contained within the city limits of Forest Grove, which is located in Washington County. So that is what we have, that's what we know, so that's what we're working with. So on the state level, our quarantine, but again, we don't want to just say it's just Forest Grove City, because things could change in the next couple months. So by casting a wider net and just calling that would be a county-wide quarantine, again, just for 180 days, that buys us some time as we continue to do these survey works, whether it's with trapping or on the ground, to kind of get a bigger picture of what it is we're looking at. So again, we're not having to create this from scratch, just modeling this of what our other partner states have done when they've been faced with EAB and how they're dealing with that. It's kind of focusing on host material. Many quarantines that I've looked at are really just focusing on ash, but because Oregon is a huge nursery state, you know, it's a $1 billion industry, and we do have a lot of hotspot nurseries located within Washington County. We need to kind of expand that by looking at not just ash, but also remember it's olive and it's white fringe tree. Even ash tree as nursery stock, I'll just put it out there, is not huge. It's not a huge commodity like rhododendron or arborvitae or something like that, but it is sold. Talking to the nursery industry themselves, they also don't really have a good indicator of the volume of trees that are really sold within Oregon nurseries. So, but again, that is something that we have to consider regulated commodity within the realm of that quarantine. And then beyond that, that would also clearly to this audience is going to cover what we've been discussing, the green lumber, tree cuttings, log stumps, things of that nature, and especially firewood, as Dave mentioned. We know that that's a vector for spreading EAB, which would also encompass not just the ash hardwood, but ash firewood, but also hardwood. And really what we're looking at is restricting the movement outside of the quarantine. And so this is, I don't know exactly when that's going to be completed and released, but what I will need from this group is to help reach those other audiences that we typically on a state level have trouble reaching when we put into these quarantine measures, just to make sure that the lumber yards, the local landscapers, et cetera, know that these are things that we're putting parameters on, that they're not supposed to be moving this material outside the county.
Yeah, Chris, if you don't mind me asking, this is kind of a question that, you know, a response question, and maybe we're going to talk about it later, but I'm wondering, if you do impose a quarantine on Forest Grove, is it within the realm of possibility that you'll be going into people's yards and destroying infested trees and that kind of thing?
No.
Okay, so that's not going to happen in this case.
No, so the quarantine is really just that. It's minimizing spread by just letting people know. And you're right, at the end of the day, we're not going to have the ash tree police out on every corner, monitoring people's yards, watching people that they're not putting, wood in their pickup trucks and taking that to their cousin's house outside of the county lines. We don't have that capacity in Oregon. It really is just about getting that message out, letting people know what that risk is, and that there are, if someone were caught, that there would be civil penalties involved in that.
Yeah, I guess I was more curious about, we were or I talked to some people that had walked around the infestation and, you know, the original infestation at the elementary school, and they had seen infested trees in the neighborhoods around the infested area. I mean, what's going to happen to those trees? Are they going to be left, or?
It'll be up to the local, whoever the ownership of those trees are, to determine the action that they want to take. Because some cases
Okay.
they really want to save those trees, and then that would have to be them using their best judgment or reaching out to an expert to ask for recommendations if that's a tree that they think is worth saving. With the caveat that if they go the treatment route, if we were talking about this yesterday, that might be just trunk injections, and that's something that has to happen under, I think it was an annual basis to some degree. So that will require maintenance. And that's also just not a guarantee that that tree will be saved indefinitely.
Right. But there's going to be no requirement that people destroy infested trees.
I mean, that would be, there's like, I think Jake mentioned that, no. So the answer to your question, no, Dave, we're not going to be mandating that people take down their trees. But that has been, I think, a long time already part of the messaging when it comes to Emerald Ash Borer, is recommending that people not plant ash trees, or some cities have already done the preemptive tree removal. So something like that, especially when we're talking about street trees, that may be something that the cities or the counties may take into accord in part of their response plans to think about what works for them in that regard. But that will not be coming down from the state level.
Okay.
I would like to just piggyback on that a point that we should be making to people is that you can't do nothing. If you do nothing, you will just be cutting down a dead ash tree in 5 years. And that's a big old question mark on that timeline. You can't do nothing about EAB. You're either cutting down a live tree, cutting down a dead tree, or treating the tree.
And in the comment section, Thomas had a good point. And if it's there's two different kind of audiences. There's the city street tree, and understand trees die from various pests and diseases and abiotic stuff. And the landowner, like a city lot owner, has to pony up and get that tree out of their yard. And that happens a lot. It's going to accelerate now with EAB and ash in the area. But then the second kind of client or customers are the soil water conservation, clean water services that manage the wild ash. And we're going to get questions like Thomas's, and I know we've already talked about this, but having like some funding to offset those control costs. If you want to be a good land steward and you're inside the quarantine area and you want to do your part to knock down trees and chip or burn them to help slow the spread of EAB, we need to kind of, I know we talked about this, but the funding, if there's any funding programs from federal and state to help those local partners and offset the cost of doing so.
Wyatt, are you talking about, you're talking about trees in riparian zones like we would have?
Yeah, like our native Oregon ash, like for instance, along the Tualatin River. Let's say the ODA's 180-day temporary quarantine encompasses part of the Tualatin River with a natural, or there's naturally occurring Oregon ash. We definitely, if we're also saying our best management practice is to, cut and pile and get rid of these trees, chip these trees. But what's our messaging for our communications team, our communications plan? Is it going to be, there's our best management practices and we don't have any state or federal dollars, or here's our best management practices, we recommend chipping and getting rid of these trees ASAP. And we do have some federal dollars to help you offset, or state dollars to help you offset. I know there's people still working on this. I'm not pressing anything, but we're going to have more of those questions.
In the landscape, we know EAB is always going to be around, and that's why APHIS is pushing for biocontrol for that. So that's where the funds on the federal side are going, is to releasing those biocontrol agents in every infested county in the United States. Karen can speak on the Forest Service side, but there's no funds available for tree removal on the USDA APHIS.
So Jake, one of the things when I read your comment that immediately occurred to me was need for biocontrol, if you're going to have those wasps, they have to have larvae to infest, right? So they need infested trees if they're going to establish a population. Is that correct? You can't
Correct
just,
for infestation, but they infest eggs as well.
right, but
And
I
not
mean, you
just
need EABs present in the tree population in order to establish the wasps.
correct.
So if the state adopts a policy, or cities and communities at the local level, as Chris was saying, adopt a if you find it, remove it policy, that at least in urban areas where there's a higher degree of urgency to remove dead and dying trees from the landscape, might make it more difficult for you to establish those wasps. So there's a potential conflict there in terms of those messaging a little bit. Like hold off, leave some trees so we can get some wasps established to slow the spread. So just let you get experts worry about that in your answers next.
So from that, Karen, do you want to go?
Well, I would just say, Jim, you're correct. It's more complex than just in every situation the trees have to be removed and taken away. And part of having people together is to decide on some kind of short-term and long-term response, and what's the place for where you remove trees, where you treat trees, where would you, to help individual landowners make those decisions, but in a coordinated way, so it hangs together. Like in wetlands where we can't do aggressive active management, those become our biocontrol reserve sites, things like that.
Versus hazard trees, that's another area. So let's say you don't have money and you're not interested in best management practices and you live in the quarantine, you're still going to have trees that are dying, hazard trees that are falling down. So just taking lessons learned, and I'm definitely not an expert in this, but for sudden oak death inside the generally infested area where you have tan oaks falling down or they're close to roads and homes, there's, we're working with ODOT to remove hazard trees. Just want to put out there the potential of pursuing state or federal funds for assistance for removing trees. It's a more of a long-term outlook, but I understand APHIS is interested in funding biocontrol, but I want to also give opportunity for the other state and federal agencies on here that might have other dollars for the other parts of IPM, which include mechanical, chemical, cultural control. So biological control is definitely supported by ODF, and we want to do everything we can to promote that establishment. But there's other things at play too, like hazard trees and people wanting to take action of slowing the spread. There might be a cost benefit analysis too. I'm sure there is a cost benefit analysis for slowing the spread of EAB at X miles with this amount of effort in biocontrol and host removal at a certain time. So I think we should explore cost benefit analysis for all those.
And I would just like to share one little bit of good news for EAB and biocontrol and conventional control. A lot of biocontrols are not compatible with conventional pesticide use. If you're spraying something that kills insects, it can kill your beneficials. That is not the case with emerald ash borer. There are options for conventional pesticide use. Trunk injections of imidacloprid and emamectin benzoate were tested with the parasitoids, and they are compatible. So the parasitoids do not seem to be affected by the pesticide effect killing the EAB. We think that's there's an interesting paper about it, but it is I will take that little win there. So that is another way that if someone is treating a large heritage tree that is already infested, some EAB will be resistant to those insecticides, and those are still susceptible to the biocontrols. So we have that little win there. And also the biocontrols are likely not going to be released on street trees. That's just, like Wyatt was just talking about, that those are hazard trees eventually. But in places like riparian zones where there are plenty of ash that no one has the capacity or the clear cut, those are areas where the biocontrol agents can act as reservoirs.
I just wanted to make a quick comment. The removal of the wild ash population, that's going to be a very probably not a very feasible thing for most of us in the Tualatin. Our riparian areas, that would be basically deforesting riparian areas, which would be counterproductive for stuff we've worked on for 20, 30 years in this area for reforestation of the riparian. So I hesitate to say it's a no, but I'm just saying that it's not an easy outcome for us as a water utility in particular, since our reforestation efforts are focusing on improving water quality by providing shade to tributary streams in the main stem Tualatin, which is about 80 miles long. So for us to come in with the feller bunchers like Christine was talking about, or to do chip and removal stuff, it's going to be a tough sell. And it would be a tough sell for, I think, a lot of our partners to have ash forests as like a dominant canopy. So I would love, Wyatt, to be honest, to echo you, I'd love to see that cost benefit analysis if somebody could do that to show where to do tree risk assessment and remove trees where it makes the most sense, and where to focus IPM on release of biocontrols, or do we figure out ways to just isolate wild ash populations that may have EAB and let nature take its course, unfortunately.
And another argument for letting the wild ash let nature take its course in conjunction with the biocontrols is determining whether there's any resistance. So in amidst all the trees that might die, the 99%, there may be that 0.7% or 0.5% that fight off the insect, and you don't know that until you see 6 or 10 years later what's still standing. So if you cut them all down, then you've lost your genetic variation. So
good point. I really like the idea of having quarantine, because I think some rule is better than no rule. And whether this thing is out of the bag, which I'm sure it is, we still don't want to be allowing or falsely promoting it just being moved all over the state. So there's lots of watersheds besides the Tualatin River, clear down into the southern Willamette Valley, the McKinsey, the southern Willamette River forks, and then over into the Rogue too. So having the quarantine is important, and then along with that, having these marshaling yards and saying, okay, if you do have the means to remove ash, take it here within the quarantine area, and this is how we're going to treat it. That's still, I think, a good talking point for our communications team, because we don't want to just say, cat's out of the bag. Because if there is some cost benefit to slowing the spread from Tualatin River down to the watersheds that feed into Eugene and Springfield, we definitely want to do that. And that's just my 2 cents on that.
I totally agree with you, Wyatt, and I get it. And we have our friends from, right next door in the city of Portland, and there's going to be folks looking at ash trees all over the place, Columbia County, Yamhill County, Tillamook, and Clatsop County too. So we're sensitive to that. It's just, I don't know, as natural area managers, we're kind of in a bind of not being able to take a really heavy hand with huge populations of just big contiguous ash. There's so many natural resource and partner and water related hurdles to get over in those areas. I just want to urge that our particular emphasis is going to be is going to be difficult to figure out in those areas, because we're so constrained by permits and vagaries of what we manage and how we manage it and who we manage it with.
Well, I think we heard the answer from Chris. The the quarantine would say you're not required to cut anything down, but you are required to not move it outside the quarantine. And then I would hope as a participant in this interagency group that you would look at the communications plan and say, oh yeah, and we promote not moving it. You know, if you are, we know where the marshalling yards are because we're part of this process. And so you would help your cooperators say, this is where you take your infested ash if you are cutting it down.
Yeah, and no problem with that. And also to echo our colleague from Metro on here, we too have property and opportunities for places to put wood temporarily or things like that. So especially because we're fairly large landowner right next to the city of Forest Grove right now. So
yeah, Karen,
we really don't want to marshal wood right next to our wetlands.
yeah.
I think I'd like to volunteer to coordinate some different groups, and I'll on best management practices for different objectives. And so I don't have expertise in all these things, but maybe I can, you know, draw on other people, and maybe Dave Shaw, you could help me out with sort of brainstorming some of this stuff. And Rob, you've got great ideas, you know, so let me know. And if you want to take me up on that, and if you want to work together. But I mean, it's a huge universe of best management practices, but how we could carve it up and come up with some good ideas for this detection in Oregon right now.
Yeah, that'd be extremely helpful for the outreach materials, Karen, to get that going. Because we're not even at the invasion curve yet. We haven't even seen mass die-off in the state. And just getting that out before we get millions of ash declining.
Yeah, we've talked with Alex, and I've been talking about this, and we were discussing the potential for some kind of, you know, decision key or decision guide, you know, depending on the situation, and we could do exactly what you were saying, Karen, sort of, but it would be nice if we had a lot of input on that, and just in terms of making sure we say the right things.
And it'd be good from, I don't know if OSU is allowed to say it, of what species should be planted and alternatives.
Well,
after ash. The regulated body, it's hard for us to say that because we regulate the nursery industry.
Oh, we can say it, but we don't know what to say yet. We're really struggling with that one because I just put a thesis in the chat box there. We found that, you know, in a lot of these sites, it's ash, and there's probably no replacement unless you're talking like, you know, because of those seasonal wetlands, those flashy wet areas in the winter. We don't know what to recommend yet, and so we need more information, more thinking about that. How, you know, whether there is going to be a replacement. Our fear is, probably everybody here, is that they're going to turn to Himalayan blackberry. You know, they're just going to go into weeds, to non-native invasives. We're really freaking out about it, actually. Anyway, sorry, Rob.
Yeah, I was going to say, Dave, so there's a couple of us on this meeting who are actually working on a fairly, I want to say small scale, because we're working at a very local level, and we're trying to keep our group small for efficiency and efficacy right now. And it's focused on climate adapted plant materials. And there's a couple of us on the call related to this. And our project has been to use the seed, sorry, I'm losing, Karen, you might remember this on Forest Service. It's a Forest Service tool.
Feedlot selection tool.
Yes,
selection.
Thanks, Brandy. Yeah, Brandy's the other partner in crime on this. The SWCD and Clean Water are working on it together with the Institute for Applied Ecology and a little bit of help from Tualatin Hills Parks and Rec. And we're looking at how to best practice, bring up some genetics potentially and or new species from Southern Oregon, Northern California in order to diversify our landscape ahead of climate change. And we have been looking also at the prevalence and survey data from those locations to give us an idea of which species we locally have that are common but not common in those systems. And so, for example, Western red cedar is a good example of just barely in its range now. And Oregon ash is one that is not as common in Northern California and all the way up into the Umpqua. So we were looking at if we could use the data we have gathered already to project what other species of trees might replace Oregon ash, such as white alder, red alder, if there are any oaks, if there are any other species. I know this gets into all kinds of territory with things like Phytophthora and stuff like that, but the point we're trying to make is that we may repurpose some of that data, look at tree possibilities in riparian areas in a more post-ash world. And Brandy, you've got more to say on that than I do maybe, so I'm just going to shut up. And this is early stuff. We're still working with Tom Kay, the Institute for Applied Ecology and Stillwater Sciences as well.
Thanks, Rob. Well, just doing a quick time check here. I want to make sure we're done at 4. So Karen, can you share, I want to go into what folks have resources that they can contribute, and then make sure that we're scheduling some next steps and schedule. So Karen, can you share what you have available for us?
Sure. And my stuff, you know, I wrote the agenda, so my stuff's pretty much listed in the agenda. But I think the big thing that we have, one, you've just been talking about replacement species. Rob Slezak of the PNW Research Station, he studied black ash, which they initially thought had no substitutes in the Midwest, and came up with some ways to research its function and how to replace it. So I'd offer him, or I'd offer to work with him and you. But I think the big thing is I've got $150,000 that I can provide. Usually the Forest Service provides its grants to ODA or ODF, and that's probably the most efficient way to get work done. And so I'd like a group to come together and say, this is our best proposal for using that. And whether it's a coordinator for ODA, or whether it's, you know, $20,000 for don't move firewood that goes through somewhere, or, you know, but I've got resources, and I want to hear a good, I don't want to make a bunch of work for people, but I want to hear a proposal from several of you about the best way to spend it. It may require a 25% match. We're working to have 0 match. So that's what I've got. The things the Forest Service spends money on are listed there. You know, we do incident management, we do communications, training, surveys, inventory, infested tree removal. If the trees still have beetles and are a risk, we don't pay to remove dead trees. And we work in traditional and in urban forests. There may be more urban resources out there. We're still looking under the couch cushions. But so I think between Chris and Wyatt and Max and Christine and some Rob, I'd like to hear some, as an outgrowth of this, I'd like to hear some proposals for that.
Anybody have comments on that? Or are we just so flush in money that we don't need any free money from you, Karen? And as Dr. Williams, go ahead.
Yeah, we have ideas and love to partner. One thing that has come to mind over the last few days and weeks and then today is setting up monitoring plots, forest monitoring plots inside or close to ground zero and a little further out from ground zero. And these are permanent monitoring plots where we can monitor for the arrival of EAB into these plots and also measure plant community response over time. So these are several years of monitoring plots. And that's what ODF and in our, again, going back to the plan, the roles and responsibilities for each agency. That's one of the roles for ODF is to do survey monitoring of forest lands. And so I see that as one potential use of Region 6 Forest Service, state and private forestry money is to do some monitoring, set up monitoring plots. And also previously mentioned firewood outreach, print materials, electronic materials. I mean, we have there's a long list. I don't want to dominate here, but yes, we at ODF, we have ideas that involve several partners here on the call. And we would be happy to be a pass-through agency, passing on as much as we can to work on the ground.
Yeah, thank you for that. And thank you, Karen, for my computer entirely froze on me there for a minute. I think from ODA perspective, yeah, outreach is definitely going to be key, and those funds would be extremely helpful to help fund a coordinator. We don't have someone currently who would be able to be pulled into dedicating more percentage of their time to help coordinate that effort. Purely that we will be onboarding a new program manager here pretty quickly. So that will help kind of be guiding this effort as well. And I'll still be involved to some degree, but having someone who's kind of really just focusing on this and helping with these communications is definitely going to be really helpful.
I'm sorry to interject again right here, but Adam Klobel, who is Christy and I's manager, he mentioned that there could be some potential infrastructure funds at ODF that could hire a coordinator for EAB. So that is one potential. Yeah, and so it was NRS 3 would be like a forest health monitoring specialist or EAB monitoring specialist. So that was kind of in the works just as of the last couple of days. It's a proposal. So that could potentially be filled by ODF, that coordination.
Okay, so we don't need to get into the nitty gritty, but clearly we just need to communicate that on, make sure that Karen's getting something that she can actually work with.
If I may interject, this does bring up a question about what the research priorities are and whether there'd be, I think if the money is better spent on coordinators and monitoring, I think that's great, but in the long term, there might be some research that, you know, that we could be doing. I think monitoring, you know, impacts the EAB is one of them, you know, but anyway, at some point, it would be nice to have a subcommittee of this group that would focus on research and could give maybe OSU some direction and, you know, some of the faculty that might be interested in research projects, you know, some, you know, reasons or, you know, to go for research at certain areas or look for research dollars in certain areas or that kind of thing. But I was hoping that this committee, you know, as it moves forward, would have a research subcommittee of some sort that would be able to, you know, advise what the priority research questions are.
Yeah.
Beyond response, if you know what I mean.
Sure, and I think that that could be lumped into Wyatt kind of mentioned earlier, and we had talked about this offline before, kind of what I'll just call a science and technology group. So that could be helping identify research projects. I think there was the, Wyatt, you had kind of talked earlier about the wood utilization and just having some more science-based decision-making in that arena. So that could be something that's tasked with that particular group.
Okay.
So it just takes, we are running close to hour here. So I do want to circle back to Karen's offer to kind of help spearhead for creating said subcommittees, because I think that might have been an ambitious objective for this meeting, is to actually get names on paper so we can walk away with our tasks in hand. I did want to bounce over to Christine or Rick or Patrick, since you all represent the council, if there's any bandwidth within the council's parameter to kind of assist with that coordination of said subcommittees.
Yeah, I think we definitely can. I mean, whether that's part of the council work or in addition to as part of the, you know, Karen's grant or whatever, I think we're open to helping in however you guys need. And Rick just chimed in, OISC can help. I mean, this is kind of one of our core missions, so we'll assist in however we can. In the communications realm, if there's anything needed to support Jim and ODA and their work, we have a kind of communications wing of our firm that does all the PR and crisis communications and all that. In fact, I had our strategic comms person pull up just the last couple weeks of coverage on EAB on all the newspaper ads, and he was able to show me, you know, all the different articles that have come out in the last 2 weeks and how many hits and everything each one got, desktop and mobile. And I mean, the word's getting out there, and there's been a lot of good news coverage on it. So kudos to Jim and his team and folks at ODA on the outreach that you guys have done. So yeah, the council can help. Our firm can assist as well. So whatever you all need. And Chris, back to you on emergency board request. Do you have kind of any thoughts or a ballpark or what all that would potentially cover if you were able to get everything you needed?
Well, for part of that, originally that was kind of going to encompass staff time. So again, so we have some folks who are already kind of spending time on this. So some of that funding money is coming from the federal monies that we've had, because we did get clearance to utilize some of those funds to do a little bit more survey work, and that was outside the traditional boundaries of how that proposal was written up. But looking towards the future, again, that's where that coordinator would come into play if we are going to use any of our staff to help with surveys, again, within the realm of what we've talked about, of what ODA's kind of focuses and capacity, outreach, because again, that's kind of where we're focusing on that. I know I've talked to Wyatt about, I don't remember if you actually did it or not, Wyatt, but firewood outreach in particular is really critical at this time. So if there's something that we can do in that, so basically it's using money for those and how much that's going to be, what that ask would be. I've also reached out to the OAN, and they said that they were willing to contribute some, basically what would equivalent to emergency funds as well. But again, you don't want to ask for all the monies if we don't have an exact plan for how we're going to use those monies.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Perfect. Sounds good. Well, to be continued. I think there's a lot of more discussion on funding and resources and things like that we can have. But we do want to try to figure out, you know, how often this group should meet, and if we need to split off into various subcommittees, or if that's something we need to determine later. We also want to make sure we are including everybody that needs to be included. So if folks have any thoughts on other folks who are missing from today's call, we can make sure to reach out to them also. So I know some folks initially before this meeting were talking about a monthly get together of this task force. I don't know if we want to set kind of a, you know, set day of it each month, second Tuesday or whatever, for a couple hours, or we could send out a poll, whatever is easiest for folks. I know it's tough to schedule with this many people, but might be just be easy to set a certain date and time and hope you all make it.
I like that idea of getting something on the books regularly. I think that's a good idea. And then identifying the committees. So I heard communications, science team, firewood, and a survey or survey and monitoring. So there's 4 right there. And then maybe have a way that people could raise their hand or sign up, not like necessarily right now, but some way to raise their hand over the next week or 2 until the next meeting. Does that sound reasonable?
I have a question real quick about that. Would survey include biological control site assessments? This is Mariah at APHIS. I switched to my phone. I'm not sure if my name transferred.
Sure. I don't see why not. That would be more like the survey 1, 2, 3, just kind of like overall the hotline, the public survey, the trapping survey, and surveying for biocontrol. Those are the 4 surveys I think we talked about. And then monitoring, if there's going to be monitoring plots set up for long-term monitoring. So that's like one work committee. And then there's a communications committee. There was a science team talk about. I might be getting them kind of mixed up here, but there was a science team and then a firewood. Those are the kind of 4 overarching ones I heard. But
And Wyatt, just to be clear, the firewood, are you meaning, because there's firewood in terms of firewood outreach and that kind of thing, and then there's the wood waste, right?
I'm sorry, sorry. How about wood utilization and wood waste? That encompasses firewood as well. So wood waste, wood utilization is one group.
I think, oh, go ahead.
How about if a small group, Chris, Wyatt, myself, I don't know if somebody else wants to volunteer, we'll come up with this. Give us a week or 10 days. We'll look over the notes. We'll come up with some committees. And I think Wyatt expressed communication, science, wood, utilization and waste, monitoring. Sarah's recommended a funding committee. I'd like to work on some kind of best management practices, but we'll look through the notes and we'll kind of filter through, and then we'll get back to folks on kind of a slate of committees that you could volunteer for and contribute to. And then we'll probably do that by email some sort. We'll also, I think we should set another meeting maybe a month from now. I think we should also, part of this note review, we're going to have to identify these action items and some potential solutions like administrative support. How can we have a platform for communication? Who maintains the email list? Stuff like that. So if all of you are okay to say, today's the first Tuesday of the month. You want to go an afternoon the first Tuesday of the month for every month? And
I say yes, let's just stick with what we've got right now. If we need to adjust, we'll adjust.
Communication.
Yes,
Yeah.
Robert, understood.
That sounds good. I think on the communication, the readiness and response plan for EAB does call on ODA to convene a communications group. And I think Andrea and I had talked about that, and this call is very helpful in that we have some more names of some people from OSU Extension and OISC that could be on that, as well as Forest Service and others. So I think there's a desire to get that communication group functioning a little bit sooner, because there's a lot of communication happening, more that will be on its way. So we may want to jumpstart that process and keep you looped in as to what's developing on that as ODA has a chance to sort of finalize that work group, because I think that would be coming together probably within the next week or 2, hopefully.
Jim, did you talk to Andrea about, because it seems like you're probably in contact with her a little bit more than I am in terms of what this communication group is going to look like. Has she given you indication that she has bandwidth to take the lead on this and creating this group, or?
We've not had an in-depth conversation about it because her bandwidth has been limited with the avian poultry issues and stuff. She did defer to me on getting the communication action plan draft done, And so as she reacts to that, that's where because it details that we want to have this interagency communication work group, and there's some recommendations in there as to who might serve on that. So I expect within the next few days to talk to her about that, and then to see, does she need help convening that or calling a meeting or what we're going to do on that. But yeah, I know bandwidth is an issue for her, and that's where we're trying to come alongside and provide.
And then, no, I didn't mean that. I wasn't trying to attack you. I was just curious.
No. We're trying to get that together.
Yeah.
We've been trading phone calls about it.
Yeah, I'm sure. Thank you.
And the council is happy we can host like all the listservs and email lists and all that kind of stuff. So
Would be
we're happy to
provide support in that arena.
I'm getting a couple notes here in the chat that some folks may prefer the second Tuesday of the month. And that first Tuesday in September is right after Labor Day. So are there any objections to the second Tuesday of the month at 1 o'clock? And then we can
No objection.
Okay. So
and don't let this schedule. Jim, you have a committee. It's known to the group. You're not running off on your own. This schedule shouldn't hinder you. And I guess we had some discussion that'll be in the notes that, if you're interested in the surveys, go to Max, and it might be Max coordinating with Carrie and Mariah. That's fine. You're not shooting off in a direction on your own that's weird. So don't let this schedule hinder you, but let's try to also be well organized and stay in touch.
Yep.
I would like to add in one little tidbit here before we run out of time. Chris Hedstrom is the Integrated Pest Management Center at OSU Outreach Coordinator, and he just submitted a proposal for PPA 7721 funding to start an EAB outreach campaign out of the IPM center over there. So I don't know, he might be a good person to loop in. The funding isn't secured yet, but he's definitely wanting to be involved.
Yeah, we've been talking to Chris. He couldn't make this meeting today. We were hoping he would. And yeah, Alex Gorman, who was here, and Dan Stark are our co-PIs with Chris. And so it'll be a joint IPM center extension. And I think it's basically doing the Oregon pest detector trainings and, purchasing materials and stuff like that for those trainings. So they're pretty hopeful, but they managed to get that in yesterday. So they put that together in like 4 days or something.
That's great.
Chris was amazing.
That's awesome. But I think one thing to iterate, I think that's great, but outreach comes in different facets. So clearly outreach for the pest detector program and doing that is one thing. Outreach for firewood is something else. Outreach in the sense of having to reach to the wood waste audience, that's another. There's going to be different flavors of outreach, right? So just kind of keeping that in mind too. So yeah, it may be that multiple parties are going to be doing their own form of outreach depending on what their audience is.
I just wanted to reiterate, you've got a large local partnership group available. We actually have a name for it. We call it Tree for All. It was an organizational sort of branding for a group of entities that have been doing a lot of this planting of things like ash trees along riparian areas, but also focused on urban landscapes as well to some degree. And under that banner, there's a lot of potential for a local response. But I think what would be really helpful is to build, I guess, a set of clear decisions and suggestions or marching orders, however you want to couch them, for us to take on. Because I think what we need is kind of a guiding set of priorities to work from. And everybody is kind of waiting with bated breath for our state and federal partners to kind of give us those. So as the group starts to congeal around those, to me, what would be helpful is, you know, what do you need of the local partners? Because we are the on the ground folks. We've got the most access to these trees.
Sure. And that's why many of our local partners, we reached out to you, invited you to be on this call, is so we could have this conversation, make these contacts, get your input. Karen.
I'm thinking if we're going to land on the second Tuesday, maybe I don't know if Wyatt, Chris, a couple of others have time this week, and we could say, let's do another meeting the second Tuesday in August and just sort of see what we've got in terms of a framework that could mobilize people, or at least generate some more volunteers. Is that too quick?
I can make time, Karen.
I'm available on Tuesday the 9th.
I can make time.
Yeah, same.
If you could give us maybe your top 5 priorities of things you would like from a local group to do, it would help us a lot, and we can figure out how to support the state effort. I think our goal right now, my internal team's goal, is to kind of wait for state guidance, but we're also feeding information internally, and we're talking to our county commissioners, who's our board of directors, and so we're trying to figure out kind of what are those top priorities you need us to do.
We'll come up with, I mean, I can definitely contribute to those top 5, but I want to challenge you too, because you're part of this planning process, and your level of organization is identified in the plan as being a participant. So I'd like to hear your top 5. So we'll bring our top 5 and you bring your top 5, and we'll see what we're missing.
That sounds good. I'm happy to do that, Wyatt, and give you what we think we ought to do. But what I think, I mean, I could give you my king for a day perspective, but I'm just trying to step back and let your expertise guide us. So
we have expertise for sure, but that sets us up for missing something. So I think you should come up with your top priorities as well. And it's a two-way street. We need to know what you're concerned about or what your clients are concerned about. So we might not know. We need you. That's why you're here.
As the notes come out, one thing I could do is provide you with some feedback if you want on, if one piece that might be helpful is if we eventually came up with a survey or something that would survey the local partners here and kind of understand what they need or what they think they want to do. There is a bit of cat herding that's going to be necessary. All apologies to the cat, Tim.
I will send out a calendar invite to everybody on this call and the list that got the invite for next Tuesday at 1 o'clock. And I may shop around for something other than GoToMeeting, just because this has some limitations. So we be on the lookout for that and notes from this call, and then we'll just plan on the second Tuesday of every month along with the committees. But thank you everybody for all your work and time today and everything you guys are doing on the ground. And I think we'll all stick it together. Any final thoughts from anybody in the -3 minutes that we have?
I just want to say, my number one priority, and if you need something to do this week, well, is survey the properties you already have permission for in Forest Grove in that surrounding area. Use the Survey 123 tool at oda.fyi/spot EAB. Go there, survey it. I will get the dashboard out to you all by the end of tomorrow, so you can see what trees have already been surveyed. But I think right now there are not enough trees surveyed where you're likely to hit an already surveyed tree. But that would be my, if we wanted something, a call to action as a sign off. Take that survey 1, 2, 3 out to the sites you have permission to be at, where likely we don't, because they're your sites. We don't know where that access point is, but if you do, go out there and survey your ash.
Thank you, Max. And the link that Karen just sent out, OregonEAB.info, that goes to one of our council site pages. So I will volunteer that page as something that we can put, these various links and resources and all that on there. So OregonEAB.info, I'll probably put the recording for this call on there and the notes and all that as well. So we'll kind of use that as our hub. Okay, thank you very much, everybody. Have a great afternoon. We'll see you all next week, Tuesday. Thank you.
Great. Awesome. Great. Thank you, everyone, for calling in. Take care.
Thank you, everyone.